Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Thousand Oaks City Council and Redevelopment Agency for Tuesday, November 17th, 2009. At this time, we'll call the meeting to order. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Fox?
Here.
Councilmember Bill De La Pena is absent at this time. Councilmember Irwin?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gillette?
Here.
And Mayor Glancy is absent at this point.
Thank you. The mayor is currently hosting the former Secretary of State in the Special Speakers Series, a short gathering upstairs, and will join us within, I assume, just a short period of time. Mrs. Rice is tonight's featured speaker on that for that series. Item 4, request for continuance of any public hearing or agenda item. We have a request to continue item 8A. Is there any, that'll be a motion, comment to the motion? Do we need anything, Madam Clerk? That's it? Okay. Please vote.
Motion carries 3-0.
Was that to a time certain or just?
To December 15th.
December 15th. Okay, thank you. Item 5, special presentations. We'll begin our special presentation section of our City Council meeting. Give me a moment to get to down to the dais.
While Mr. Mayor Pro Tem is going down to the dais, I just want to also bring to Council's attention that under 4, City Council will not be hearing the closed session item 14B this evening.
Thank you. Our first special presentation this evening, I would like to introduce Sherry Smith, Business Development Director for the Ventura County American Heart Association. Sherry? No, come on around here. I'm just going to. The American Heart Association is the national voluntary health agencies whose mission is building healthier lives, free of cardiovascular disease and stroke. Their numerous programs have helped improve the lives of countless people. Sherry, I understand you have some news to share with us this evening. And let me check. Mary, did Connie want to come down? Or? No. Okay. Sherry, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. The fact remains that heart disease is still the #1 killer in this country. And with obesity rates on the rise, it's become increasingly difficult for Americans to choose to live a healthier lifestyle. I have the distinct pleasure this evening of recognizing one of just 30 cities in this entire country for creating innovative solutions to develop fitness in their community. So with this honor, the American Heart Association has chosen the City of Thousand Oaks with recognition as a Start Fit Friendly company. The City of Thousand Oaks has worked very hard in the year 2009 to get its employees moving, to offer creative ideas of eating right, and also engaging employees in exercise. I'm sure many of you have seen take the stairs, not the elevator outside. Little tips like this make a difference. And again, with heart disease is the #1 killer in this country, it takes leadership that the City of Thousand Oaks demonstrates to start engaging citizens in the community to start living a healthier lifestyle. So on behalf of the American Heart Association, as well as Forbes magazine, who's printed a recent article commemorating organizations that are leading innovative fitness. I'd like to present to the city a plaque for its gold achievement as a Start Fit Friendly company, and I encourage each one of you to visit startwalkingnow.org to start learning tips and tools about how you can live a healthier lifestyle. So with that said, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sherry. We're honored and pleased to know the city is doing our part to encourage good health habits especially for our employees. And Connie Hickman, our Human Resources Director, is leading that effort for the city, and she was given an opportunity to comment, but decided to decline tonight. So anyhow, that was the only one we had, wasn't it? All right, thank you. Item 6 is the public comment section of the agenda. Would the clerk please call public comments?
This is the time and place for public comments. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. All speakers for public hearing shall be called and heard during the public hearing. Pursuant to council standards of operation, the mayor may assist any speaker from straying into areas not within the city's jurisdiction. All remarks should be addressed to the City Council as a whole. Under state law, issues discussed under public comments can have no action unless listed on the agenda and may be referred to the city manager for administrative action or scheduled on a subsequent agenda. All documents for City Council and the official city record should be presented to the city clerk prior to speaking, and speakers are requested to state their name and city of residence for the record. 3 people have presented cards, and pursuant to council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Our first speaker this evening, Mr. Bill Thomas. Mr. Thomas, and second up will be Dr. Richard Elsley. If Dr. Elsley would start working his way towards the front. Mr. Thomas, please give your name and community of residence. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Thomas, and I'm a resident of Moore Park. Members of City Council, I'm here today to, first of all, introduce myself. I'm the Vice President of Charities for the Ventura County Professional Firefighters Association, and I'm joined here tonight with district representatives from the MDA. And I've come to let you know that we're back at that time of year again where we're going to be conducting our MDA Fill the Boot fundraiser. And I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it involves our firefighters going out into the cities with our boots in hand and getting donations from the public to support MDA. The International Association of Firefighters is the second largest contributor to MDA every year, second only to the Jerry Lewis telethons. So we're kind of a big component for them, and we're always very happy to do it. This is I've just about finished my first year as the Charities Vice President, so this is my first year of doing the Fill the Boot or organizing it. And one of the things that I'm real excited about is this is going to be the first year, in addition to the cities of Ojai, Camarillo, and Simi Valley, this will be the first year that we're actually going to do this in Thousand Oaks. So last year we raised $37,300 without Thousand Oaks, and so we're pretty excited about being out here. I'm actually stationed at Fire Station 31, so this is an area that I work and hold pretty dear to my heart. So we're excited to be out here. We think we can probably add about $5,000 to $10,000 to that number to contribute for next year's totals. So with that, if you have any questions, like I said, I brought experts with me, so I'm just the guy that gets the people out there holding the boots, but if there's any questions you have, I could just defer over to these two, and they'd be more than happy to answer any.
Bill, would either of your experts care to make a comment?
I would love them to. Get me off the mic. That'd be great.
Okay, let's see where we go.
Well, hello, members of City Council. I would like to, just back up what Bill has mentioned, that the IAFF is, one of our largest contributors. Additionally, all the funds raised in our Fill the Boot campaign stay locally. I'm the executive director of the Santa Barbara office. We cover the Tri-Counties area, Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, San Luis Obispo County. The funds raised during the boot drive will go to local families affected by neuromuscular disease. We cover over 300 clients in the Tri-Counties area, many of whom are in Ventura County. So their participation really means the world to us and to our clients, and allows us to continue to provide the excellent free services that we are able to all of our registered clients.
Thank you. Anything else? If you have the information available, we would be more than happy to include a link on the city's website. You get the information.
That would be wonderful.
We have it. We have the flyer, so we'll just do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Richard Elsley, followed by Linda Wilson. Dr. Elsley?
My name is Richard Elsley. I'm a resident of the city of Thousand Oaks. And yes, members of the City Council, you guessed it, it's time for another exciting, informative, and eminently understandable talk in the Discovery Center's Science Speaker Series. Thursday, November 19th, that's 2 days from now, Eric Pounders of the United States Geological Survey will talk about earthquakes, what scientists have learned about them, when they occur, why they occur, how you can prepare, and what you can do when they happen. 7:30 in the evening, Thursday, at Baxter Biosciences, 1 Baxter Way in Westlake Village. The ticket is a very nominal $15 for adults, $10 for children, senior citizens, and teachers. The next lecture is going to be in February, and the title is, What's Happening to Planet Earth? What are we, almost 7 billion people, doing to our one and only planet? More information on this series is available on our website, sciencespeakerseries.org, sciencespeakerseries.org. So everyone follow the example of your mayor and come and attend the Science Speaker Series.
Dr. Elsley, thank you very much. And I would, the same thing, has this information been passed on to be included on the city's website?
I've handed flyers to these ladies over here.
All right. Well, that'll be fine. We'll just make sure that happens then.
Thank you.
Fine. Thank you very much. Linda Wilson, followed by Mr. Nick Kidwai.
Good evening. My name is Linda Wilson, and I live in Thousand Oaks, and I am here on behalf of the New West Symphony. As a current board member and president of the New West Symphony League this season, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to issue you all an invitation to our Poinsettia Ball, which is going to be held on December 10th at the Hyatt Westlake. This is one of our major fundraisers for the year, and it is because of this that we're able to continue our educational outreach and our community outreach with such programs as the Symphonic Adventures and the Music Van. This year the ball is even more exciting, as we will have an honoree for the very first time in its 22-year history. It is our honor to recognize Nancy Israel and her beloved late husband Bill for their outstanding, generous, and selfless contributions not only to the symphony, but to the community at large. So come join us for an elegant evening with dinner and dancing and music and a chance to pay tribute to a really good friend. I have invitations for each of you, and would really love to see you all at the ball. If you have any questions, please contact Sandy Kane, whose number is on the invitation, or contact a league member. We'd all be glad to talk about this amazing event. Thank you for the time you've given me this evening to share with you this invitation, and I'd also like to thank you just for all your assistance and cooperation in the past with the New West Symphony. Come to the ball. It's going to be a great night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Best wishes. Final speaker, Mr. Nick Kidwai. Mr. Kidwai.
I begin in the name of God, who is the most beneficial, most merciful. My name is Nick Iqbal Kidwai, and last time I checked, Dr. Gillette, I don't know, Dr. Galancy has started calling you doctor, so I guess you must have a PhD. Congratulations. It's not fun coming here. I purposely did not come to the last meeting. It doesn't make much difference. My first city manager said, the council meeting is supposed to be televised, and it's supposed to just show us in a positive light. The maximum that we look at is to have a zero level, and really don't care about having negative comments. And one of the things that is so disturbing for those of us that follow, and have been following this government for 25 plus years, is the history and the not keeping up with the promises. If TOTV can show the overhead that I have put over there, it was interesting that the gentleman was here from the Discovery Center. That's from the Discovery Center website. Thank you. Unfortunately, they're not even in Thousand Oaks anymore. I think they are in Lindero Canyon, I think in LA County, in Westlake. They were made all kind of promises that they would have a wonderful center next door, and now they're not even in the picture. And Americans are so forgiving. I mean, maybe I should be like that, they didn't even say a word about it, and nobody's going to complain about it. I mean, this is, all slick brochures. There's even more of these in the lobby over here, and these are going out to every citizen every quarter. In these hard economic times when everybody's cutting back on advertising and all that, this is again, like the city manager has said, to show the city in a positive light. TOTV, if you can show this right from the cities, everybody got this, that's the Civic Arts Plaza Theater. This is free advertising. It's great. In fact, I'm a supporter of it, and I would like the city to formally support the theaters, because the theater was built on a false premise that it would be self-supporting and no taxpayer funds will be used. And it's so unfortunate that because of inaction and because of trying to do things under the table, like right now, it's been almost a year. A report about the theaters and arts is delinquent. This is Mayor Glancy's last meeting, and what has he accomplished in a year? I supported him, but simple things, even like taking care of the cards of the speakers, is still the same as 15 years ago. Thank you, Dr. Gillette.
Thank you, Mr. Kidway. That concludes the public comment section. We move to item 7, City Redevelopment and Agency Consent Calendar. We comment, pleasure of the council, we do have one speaker card. Being no comment from the council at this time, Mr. Nick Kidwai. Mr. Kidwai?
Mayor Gillette, City Council Nick Kidwai. Really don't want to speak on the consent calendar. It's supposed to be for routine items, but it's anything but routine. If the TOTV will again do me a favor, this is a good thing that we do. And this is the minutes from September 22 of this year. I thought I had some older minutes, but it gives Mr. Harry Sullivan, who's involved with promoting the arts, his designation and title and everything, and what he says. But for every citizen that speaks, and we have some important meetings today, the minutes do not reflect what is happening. Nobody can read the minutes and tell what is happening. President Obama is just now is leaving China, I think. How would you like the Chinese premier to confront the president and say, you talk about democracy and you talk about being an open government, but look at how your citizens are being treated. Here are the minutes from council meeting, from the planning commission meeting. In fact, all the bodies over here have the similar minutes. For God's sake, I mean, this is just basics. I don't like to talk about this. There are more important things, but if you don't take care of the basics, how can you do the other finer things which are part of your mission? Again, you have 3 or 4 items on the wastewater expenditures, etc. These things belong in a report for the public works, and they should be discussed. There should be transparency on them. You do not really need to know the nooks and crannies about them. There's a chromatograph that is being bought, and there are technical people that know about it to replace it after 15 years. But there should be some common sense thing. There was a front page story about the job of the clerk treasurer requiring some additional qualification rather than just a 4-year degree or a high school. You don't really need to be water quality experts, but to just without any discussion pass these things is really not fair to the taxpayers, it's not fair to the residents of Thousand Oaks, and it's not fair to the oath that you have taken for this office. I thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Kidway. That concludes the speakers on consent calendar. Pleasure of the council. I'll move the consent calendar. Comments on the consent calendar? There being none, please vote.
Motion carries 4-0.
We move to item 9A, department reports. Report by Mr. Jay Spurgeon, Deputy Public Works Director. Mr. Spurgeon.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I'm very excited to bring this item before you to move our Automall parking project forward. Along with Finance Director John Adams, with me on the dais is Jane Edelman from our Finance Department, one of the many staff members who have really been working hard on the project. Also, we have tonight in the audience a number of representatives from the various dealers. I think you'll be hearing from them during the public comment section. The Thousand Oaks Automall, most of us have probably been there and hopefully been purchasing automobiles there. I certainly have in the past. But it's about 54 acres located between Thousand Oaks Boulevard and the freeway. There's 9 different property owners and 22 separate parcels. The Automall really started in the 1960s. 2 dealers were located on Thousand Oaks Boulevard, one down by the freeway, and it's expanded and developed into dealerships that carry 29 separate brands, making it the world's largest Automall. The Automall, a very major business sector in the city, produces about a quarter of our city recurring sales tax revenue, so very important. You can find just about any brand you want in the Thousand Oaks Automall. The issues that have led to this project are very familiar to council, primarily just not enough parking. There are about 600 spaces in city streets, parking spaces there, about a third of them along Automall Drive next to the freeway. About 300 spaces are available throughout the various dealer properties for their employees. But together, that's just not enough. There's about 1,200 employees in the Automall, again, a very major employer in the city. That was, of course, 1,200 maybe about a year and a half ago. The employees are less today, but as you'll see, there's still not insufficient parking, even in the economic downturn here. This has been a project that or a subject that's been worked on between city staff and the dealers for over 10 years. The last couple years, very focused effort on expanding parking within city streets. Other issues include very dated and tired streets, landscaping, the freeway sign, and there's really no wayfinder signage. Sometimes it's hard to find the dealer you're looking for if you're not familiar with the area, and it's not very pedestrian-friendly area. These two photos I took this morning, again, demonstrating that even in the economic downturn, there's just no parking spaces out there. I drove around, and Automall Drive is the top picture. The lower picture is Court Avenue. Spaces are all full. The current freeway sign was permitted by the city in December 1993, and under a special use permit. Clearly, it's kind of a dated sign. As mentioned, some of the landscaping is getting tired and worn out. A couple of these pictures are the drainage course along the freeway, and then also along Mormon Avenue. We've made quite a bit of progress, especially last couple years, in response to the city making this one of its top 10 priority projects. Council did that in 07-08. This capital improvement budget has been allocated $2 million redevelopment funds toward this project. It's really been a partnership, and I've really enjoyed seeing that develop as I've been involved here the last couple of years. All the dealers have been involved in many meetings. Staff from basically every department except for libraries and facilities theaters have been involved in the project. A deposit agreement was approved back in March of 08 and last year also in June, design engineer was brought on board. So what we've accomplished to date is completed the preliminary design phase. We've been meeting with the dealers and looking at various alternatives to expand parking within existing public streets. And you can see from this slide and in your staff report, 4 alternatives that were vetted out, ranged in cost $5 million to $12 million. You can see on the slide here, and up to additional 421 spaces could be built, depending on which alternative. But ultimately, through working with the dealers, alternative 4 was selected. Would add 364 additional spaces. Cost about $8.5 million. This would be done through widening all the streets, adding angled parking. Probably the best approach is to phase this and do probably Automall Drive widening first, which provides 189 spaces at a little over half the cost, and then coming back and doing the side streets at a future phase. And the project would include landscaping, pedestrian amenities, and signage, including looking at upgrading the freeway sign. And this graphic just provides a quick look at how we would widen. The existing side streets are about 66 feet wide and have angled parking on one side and parallel parking on the other. We would widen those streets 11 feet to provide angled parking on both sides. This is a little snapshot of Marmon Avenue down near Automall Drive. And this kind of shows how the angled parking would be laid out. We would include speed humps throughout the Automall, and some bulb outs at intersections, again to calm traffic, make things a little more pedestrian friendly. There would be landscape planter islands throughout that would be included in the design and construction. And the existing driveways and Automall monument signs would pretty much be left intact, so that we're not having to do a lot of construction on the dealership properties. This is cross sections of Automall Drive next to the freeway. There's about 60 feet of existing right-of-way now, parallel parking on both sides. We could widen that by 20 feet out towards the freeway to gain our angled parking on both sides. Would require a fairly small, less than 5-foot retaining wall out there to do that. And this is a snapshot of Automall Drive at Cord. One of the things that we need to recognize is the impact of construction should we move forward on the dealerships and their business. And so clearly that's one of the reasons we need to phase a project like this. We're going to need to include very good traffic control and temporary signage to show how to get to the various dealerships, and probably look at off-site parking for employees in order to to make a construction phase the least impact to the dealers. The existing zoning in the Auto Mall includes design criteria for landscaping and signage and whatnot, and this project would refine or change some of those criteria. So we would need to go through a municipal code amendment to update those design standards for this zoning. And we're asking council tonight to initiate that code amendment. That would go to Planning Commission before it comes back to City Council sometime next year. And also, we think that it would be very beneficial to form an ad hoc advisory committee, a citizens committee, similar to what was done for the Oaks Mall expansion. That proved to be a very beneficial process for them, and it included citizen representatives from area HOAs, the business community, and other business leaders. We would like to do the same thing here and be able to use that committee to bounce off ideas and get input on some of the design criteria, including the landscaping, the pedestrian amenities, signage, the monument sign out the freeway. So that's another item that we're asking council to authorize us to do that. Back in May of 2007, council did appoint Mayor Glancy and Councilmember Fox to an ad hoc committee for this project. So those, presumably those folks would continue as we move forward.
All right. Good evening, City Council. This evening I will briefly be talking about the project financing and the formation of the Community Facilities District. As mentioned earlier, in March of 2008, City Council approved the resolution acknowledging receipt of a petition to form a Community Facilities District for the Auto Mall Parking Improvement Project, and approved a deposit and reimbursement agreement with the Auto Mall Association. Per the deposit agreement, the Auto Mall anticipated design costs would be upwards of $500,000. The city and the Auto Mall would share part of the deposit agreement. Did have the Auto Mall and the city sharing in design costs, and with the Auto Mall paying 100% of the formation costs. As noted in the slide, so far the Auto Mall has paid 90% of the preliminary design costs, which was 50% of their cost of the preliminary design, 90,000, I'm sorry, and 60,000 for the formation costs. With preliminary design complete, the next step is to do the final design. This final design is estimated at $550,000, with the Auto Mall's share being $275,000. While the original intent was to form a CFD to fund the public improvements, because of the economy, staff is now recommending the formation of the Community Facilities District to help the Auto Mall fund half of the final design costs, which is $275,000. With the formation of the CFD does guarantee repayment of the final design costs by the auto dealers with over a 5-year period with interest. Payments would not start until 2011, at which point there'll be discussions on doing a larger CFD for the public improvements. This will be a decision point for the dealers to move forward in the next phase, which would be construction of the public improvements. Tonight, in your green packet, staff has provided several items. I've sort of outlined them here. One is a preliminary boundary map, which includes all the dealerships and all 9 property owners. We also included 6 signed petitions received by the property owners that have agreed, or at least have signed the petitions agreeing to a max special tax and willing to move forward with the formation of the CFD. The other thing that we provided was 2 letters of support by dealers that did not sign petitions but are in support of the project. One dealer is willing to pay their costs up front before the formation of the district. The other one we are still working with, staff is still working with to figure out their allocation of the tax spread. I also want to point out that Exhibit B is part of the resolution of intent. This is also provided. This provides the preliminary tax spread for the $275,000 per dealership or per property owner. This is a special tax which is maxed out at $275,000, and so what this shows you is the allocation to each parcel. Up on the screen should be the proposed district boundary map. As you can tell, this includes the complete auto mall with all 9 property owners and all dealerships. This may be revised between now and the January 12th meeting as we refine the spread and the participation of the dealers. So we're talking about the next steps after tonight. Tonight you will approve the resolution for the intent of forming the facilities district. Over the next month, staff will work to finalize the boundary map and the tax spread, and this will be with the dealers as we meet with them over the next 4 weeks. Ballots will be mailed around the first of the year, and the public hearing will be held January 12th for actually the formation of the district. Right here, we are providing you the parking project schedule. Figuring that the formation of the CFD is done in January, part of that evening we'll also approve the final design contract. We will start the municipal code amendments and start the development of the advisory committee, and that should take between January and September before we return to you in the fall of 2010. At that point, before moving forward, the dealers and the city will have, it will be another decision point whether or not to go out to bid. Or to actually accept the bids after we receive them, and so the formation of the CD for construction costs, which is January 2011. Award construction contract would happen in February 2011, and construction phase 1 will happen between April and December of 2011. So tonight we have 5 recommendations in front of you. The first one is to approve the street parking conceptual plans. Adopt the resolution initiating the MC for updating zoning standards, adopt resolution initiating CFD proceedings, approve a amended and revised deposit agreement, and authorize the formation of an ad hoc citizens advisory committee. I do want to mention that the draft or the revised deposit agreement is also in your reading packet tonight. And I think that will end the presentation, and staff is available for comments.
Thank you very much. Questions of staff? Mrs. Irwin.
Thank you very much, and I do think it's great that we're moving forward on this. So we really do need to acknowledge that the auto mall is responsible for, in large part responsible for the quality of life that we enjoy here in Thousand Oaks. I had a question about, we have the phase 1 and phase 2. And does that $4.4 million for phase 1, does that already include landscaping? And approximately, if it does, approximately what % is for landscaping?
Those cost estimates do include landscaping.
So there's landscaping in both phases?
In both phases, yes. Okay. And I can tell you the percentage shortly.
Okay, just an approximate idea. And then the other question I have for the preliminary landscape plan, I can't tell if the trees are planted there already, or are you adding a significant number of new trees, or do you have an idea of how many trees are being added?
We do have a conceptual landscape plan that was included in the agenda packet.
Right.
And there'll be conceptually actually end up being perhaps more trees than are there now, because many of the side streets are pretty denuded, and the concept would be to have those landscaped planter, the fingers, include trees in those.
Do you have an idea of how much we're spending on landscaping in that first?
About $500,000.
And obviously working to make sure that we don't end up blocking signage and that they'll still be able to see the signs.
Correct, yeah, that's something very important to the dealerships, of course.
Okay, and then the other thing is from the pictures of the parking spots, I can't tell, where is the land, where is it coming from? Are the sidewalks being narrowed, or are they still going to be the same width? I know that there's probably, on the auto mall, it goes toward the freeway, but what about on the side streets? Where is the land coming from, the extra 10 or 12 feet?
Very good question. Currently, there are 10-foot landscape buffers behind, between the back of each sidewalk and the dealership parking area, the actual dealer paved areas. And we're basically going to encroach into that. So we're going to widen, and those landscape buffers will be reduced. And that's one of the design criteria we need to address in the code amendment.
Yeah, that wasn't clear to me from the picture. Thank you for that. And then is it the staff recommendation for the council committee to work with the Citizens Ad Hoc Committee, or is your recommendation for them to work separately?
I think the answer is yes, we would want them to work together, and we would use the model of the Oaks Mall, where there were a number of meetings jointly between the council ad hoc and the citizens ad hoc committees. But the citizens ad hoc committees would meet probably more regularly with the design team, and then maybe occasionally have the council ad hoc committee sit in.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Fox?
Just for the viewing public and the community, I know the report indicates it, but where would the funds come from the city?
City in 2007 appropriated $2 million from the redevelopment agency. The auto mall is in the RDA, or the redevelopment agency, and so we have tax increment money that's come in that's been set aside or allocated for this project. So the redevelopment agency.
Okay, and so again, most folks viewing may not be familiar with how the city does capital versus operating. Can you just briefly describe, would that have an impact on city operations?
No, this was out of reserves for the RDA and specifically for capital improvements within the redevelopment agency. So no, this does not have any impacts on operations at all.
Okay, very good. And then I was looking through here, the formula for the district once it's established, and then the tax increment. Have we established how long, over what period of time, the reimbursement would occur?
Currently, for the final design cost, which is the $275, the special tax is a max for 5 years, and so it's $275 divided by 5 plus the interest. So that's for the final design. That won't be assessed until we get to the decision points of, do we go forward with the project. Ultimately, that could be rolled into the project, and if it was rolled into the project, it could be upwards to 30 years. Financing, the larger amounts, we would allow them to issue bonds and do 30 years.
Okay. And I didn't see this in the report. Have other cities with auto malls, I don't know if they have parking challenges like we do, but is this, are we breaking new ground here, or are we, I don't think we are, but again, just for clarification, is this similar and consistent with what other cities do?
The answer is yes. We can provide examples. I think I have one in Santa Clarita that has provided beautifications projects for their auto mall, so this is not an uncommon practice.
Okay, very good. Thanks very much.
Ms. Spildale, opinion.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for your presentation. I have a question regarding one of the letters in the green packet tonight by Kemp Ford. It states that they are not signing the petition because the proposed formula for apportioning the project design costs among the property owners in the CFD should be revised. How would they be revised in order to help Kemp Ford sign the petition?
Exhibit B talks about factors in which we use to allocate costs. Right now, we're talking about allocating the final design, and so there's three major factors that were used: employees, front footage, and acreage. And so, in working with the dealerships and each of the representatives, we came up with what we thought was equitable to some extent, but still could be refined. And I think that in his letter, the request was to provide support for the project, in which I think he clearly does. I think he does have a concern on the spread because he's one of the larger, specifically Fort Kemp is one of the larger parcels, and he believes that he provides ample parking for his employees. So part of the next month is for staff to try to work with him and try to assist him in recognizing how we did the formula and working those things out. So that's the goal over the next month.
Okay, and what, hypothetically speaking, no agreement can be reached? Will then the other parties, will they be picking up the tab, or how would that work?
At this point, we would talk. This process is not just with Kemp. As you mentioned, we've had discussions with all of the dealers as part of meeting with the Auto Mall Association. If that's the case, we will talk to them about revising the boundary map, which would include not including that one parcel, and the other dealers would have the decision point of picking up his portion. And I think the calculation right now, based on his percentage, he has about 9% based on, correct me when I'm wrong, 6%? 6%, so it's 6 times the 275. That would be allocated to the other dealers. And that's, again, something we'll work with the auto dealers on. But the formation, the district would not include that parcel, and the spread would be among the remainder of the property owners.
Thank you. The staff report also indicates that the city will incur significant costs for the CFD formation and to assist the Auto Mall in doing that. It is in the green packet. The staff hours and so forth are estimated to be tens of thousands of dollars. How will the city then be reimbursed?
Talking about that was the original deposit agreement, does outline a max for staff time. Our current projections based on this initial step in forming the district for the final design will not be $40,000. It will actually be less than 10. And so the $60,000 that has been deposited by the Auto Mall in our calculations is sufficient to pay for all formation costs. And as far as the design costs, we're still in we're abiding by that. The Auto Mall is paying 50% and the city is paying 50%. So so far the burn has been more on the Auto Mall with the payment of the 100% of the formation costs.
Okay, I just would like to confirm that any costs incurred by the city will be offset by this district formation in the future?
Correct.
And how many years did we say would that be?
30 years. Part of the current spread as well does have a small admin fee, which is I think 2% for the annual process of paying it on the rolls and stuff. But again, this is the max tax, and that's the other aspect of it. We'll calculate it based on the actual cost, so that is included.
And regarding the ad hoc committee, the Citizens Ad Hoc Committee, which we have used in the past, as you mentioned, for the Oaks Mall, for example, how are we going to reach out to citizens? Are we going to ask the usual players to help us out, or are we actually trying to include fresh faces?
It will probably be some of both. We actually have already had an initial meeting with a number of representatives from HOAs in the Westlake area. And so it was a very positive meeting. So, I mean, clearly the Westlake Joint Board should be represented. I mean, they cover that entire area of town, as well as Westlake Hills. They were there, Braemar, and others. So I think clearly those are folks already engaged. They're already citizens engaged in their community, and I think they would be very, very well suited for that kind of committee.
So it will be by invitation only, where there won't be an advertisement in the Acorn or the Star asking people to apply, such as we do for committees that we currently have.
Well, I think the process is still going to be determined. I mean, I can't say no that we wouldn't do that, or yes we would, but I think we would again follow the model that the Oaks Mall used. That was very successful.
Mr. Fox, did you want to weigh in on that?
Just maybe for information, I was the chair of the Oaks Mall Citizens Committee, and that was a very open, very inclusive process. Several of the meetings had upwards of 20 to 25 people at the meetings. They're open to the public. Very open, very transparent process. And so I would think that a project, and that didn't involve any city dollars at all. That was just really a design. It was a land use issue. So it would be my observation that this would be like the Auto Mall, or like the Oaks Mall rather, that it would be an open process, that anybody that wanted to attend the meetings and participate would be encouraged and welcome.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitnick. You had a comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, for clarification, it will be analogous to the Oaks Mall Citizen Advisory Committee, and part of the thought process is there will certainly be representation from the auto dealers. We were also thinking the Westlake Joint HOA Board, have their president or somebody from that group. The housing subdivision behind the Do-It Center, that development over there, they've been impacted by parking issues, to have a representative from that group, and a representative or two from the businesses on the boulevard, not part of the auto mall community, and then other interested, concerned residents who've been monitoring this issue and like to participate. So it'll be a very open and democratic process. Thank you.
Again, one of the reasons why I originally initiated these citizens committees for these large community projects is you actually want diversity of thought, diversity of perspective on the committee in the early stages. We found, particularly with the Oaks Mall, that process provided for really value added, and we started with one project and we ended up with, I won't say a completely different project, but there were a number of changes that the Oaks incorporated based on input from the citizens, and it made for a very smooth, very nice, essentially non-contested public hearing. And other models have been used, certainly with the promenade and to a lesser extent with the lakes. It's a model that works, and I cannot think of a bigger city partner than the Auto Mall over the years, and so I would expect that model has worked very, very well. It would be in everybody's interest when this comes to the Planning Commission and ultimately to the Council that most of the issues have been worked out, and essentially the public hearing will be one that would just basically smoothly go through the process.
Thank you. Further questions of staff? There being none, we have a number of speakers on this item. I'll call the speakers, and I'll call the next person come behind them. If you would move down, there are a couple chairs behind the speaker podium that are reserved, and so we can move this along. The first speaker, Susan Murata. Ms. Murata, if you'd please give your name and community of residence. The second speaker is Karen Branham. Good evening. Oops. There you are.
I have a loud voice, but I still need that. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Gillette, City Council members, and staff. I am so happy to be here tonight and so grateful, and you'll probably hear me say grateful and thankful 1,000 times because we really are grateful for your support and your partnership in moving this project to the next step. We'd like to thank you for having the fortitude and the understanding that businesses in this community are residents also. Oh, I forgot to say my city of residence, sorry. It's Simi Valley, but I've resided at the Auto Mall for 34 years. Anyway, you see businesses now as your residents too, and you know that making businesses successful in Thousand Oaks ultimately helps the entire city. And as Jay mentioned, for those people that still don't understand the significance of helping the auto mall succeed, we do participate. We generate 25% of the reoccurring sales tax dollars in this city. And then there's people that say, oh, it's not sales tax dollars that the city needs, it's property tax dollars, which isn't true, but nevertheless, the Thousand Oaks Auto Mall dealers pay property taxes as well, tens of thousands of dollars of property tax every year, not to mention business license fees, thousands of dollars of business license fees. So the auto mall really is a very integral part of the city of Thousand Oaks. But let me talk a little bit about the project, because the auto mall really is the gateway to Thousand Oaks. It's the first thing you see when you leave, coming down the freeway out of Westlake Village. And it, quite frankly, is tired. The landscaping, the auto mall sign are kind of hideous. And a lot of us have spent millions of dollars either building or improving our properties. That we just finished the Mercedes dealership, and that was a $10 million project. And we're getting ready to invest millions of dollars in this project. But quite frankly, we can't move forward without this support, without the partnership that we have with the city. And the auto mall, like Jay said, was laid out in the 1960s, and the auto mall signs from the 1990s. And again, it's tired. It's no different than you wanting to get rid of that shag carpet that you put in your house 20 years ago, and now you want to put in some nice Berber carpet or wood flooring. Well, our auto mall sign is our shag carpet, and it needs to be refreshed. So in closing, I'd like to say in advance, thank you, Council, very much for your support, and especially thank you to city staff. Scott, thank you so much for having so many of your members help us in this effort. Jay Spurgeon, Gary Wartek, Candace Hong, Amy Albano, John Adams, thank you so much for your guidance through all of this, and we look forward to working with you to bring this to fruition finally. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murata. Next speaker, Karen Branham, followed by Scott Stanley, followed by Victoria Rusnak-Pearson. Hello.
Hello, my name is Karen Branham. I live in Simi Valley, California, and I just wanted to thank everybody involved with the Community Facilities District in initiating the process. I work for Paul Ladin, and he was one of the original dealers in the auto mall. He started in 1968, and we built the facility that we're in now in 1972, and it's old and tired along with the surroundings, so it definitely needs to be refreshed. And if he were here to hear you say, Ms. Irwin, that it's our sales tax dollars that are responsible for the life in Thousand Oaks, he'd fall over, because we have not been afforded a partnership with the city. And so thank you all for affording us a partnership to move forward with this in being able to refresh the area, because it just needs a facelift so badly. And I wanted to thank Jay Spurgeon and Candace Hong and Amy Albino and John Adams and Jane Albin. I know that you put countless hours, and I just wanted to thank everybody so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Branham. Scott Stanley, followed by Victoria Rusnak-Pearson, followed by Chris Shaver. Hi.
How you doing? My name is Scott Stanley, a resident of Newbury Park. Just wanted to come up and also say thank you to everybody. Ladies did a great job of thanking everybody individually. But a couple of things I'd like to point out is where we were a couple of years ago with probably 200 more employees, and we couldn't find parking. So ultimately, our people ended up parking in the Ralph's parking lot or the other shopping centers around and infringed upon the neighbors here. And we don't want to infringe upon anybody. We want to add to the city. We want to give that 25%. And they'll probably shoot me for saying I'd like to give a little bit more. But, I mean, ultimately, the better off our business is doing, the better off our city's doing, and the better off our people are doing. The auto mall drive, especially, is dangerous right now at times. You can't see that well around the corners. We're going to put in things, we're going to put in bumps that'll slow it down. We'll give enough parking for everybody to where they don't have to dodge around each other. And we'll just improve it so that we're more attractive to everybody to come up here instead of buying from other auto malls in the outlying areas, and we lose their tax dollars, unfortunately. But I do want to say thank you to everybody. It seems like a lot of hard work over the last couple of years, and it will pay off. I mean, you look from the 60s to now and where we're at, and who knows where we'll be in the next 5, 10, 20 years. I'd like to be prepared for that business that's coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Victoria?
Good evening. My name is Victoria Resnack Pearson. I'm here representing the Auto Mall Association as their president, and I also represent the Resnack organization that's been in the community for over 25 years with our Porsche, Audi, and BMW stores. Clearly, we have invested quite a bit of money into our business here and are very pleased to be partners with the city, and thank you for all of your support in our building projects. Obviously, the parking situation is one that's been identified and discussed. We are pleased to be able to be part of the solution and feel very strongly that the partnership in paying for the parking solution is very attractive to us, and we appreciate that. We appreciate that from the city. I'd also like to thank Councilmember Irwin for recognizing the landscaping issue. While we are all for beautification of all of the cities, frankly, we really appreciate your recognition of the fact that we're in the automotive business. We need signage. Those kinds of things are very important to the flow of traffic in the auto mall. I also would like to bring up the topic of the sign. Excuse me, sorry. The topic of the sign is a large issue for us. We have an increasing amount of competition in outside cities. And with that competition, every time another dealer nearby gets a conquest sale from our stores, our franchises collectively, that's city tax dollars, those sales tax dollars that go away. So we as partners need to be competitive in making sure that consumers, as they drive by, as they visit the different businesses in Thousand Oaks, know that we're there, what brands we are, and that we are modernized and ready to do business. So the sign is a big issue for all of us in the auto mall, and we want to thank you for including that in this project. It goes without saying thank you to all the city staff. They've been fantastic, and we really look forward to finding a great solution and propelling this forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Chris Shaver, followed by Nick Kidway.
Good evening, City Council members. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. I certainly do. I live in the city of Thousand Oaks. I've worked at the Auto Mall for over 20 years. But more importantly than that, I've been a resident of the city of Thousand Oaks for over 20 years as well. You know, it's been my home for the last 20 years, and so we live in the community. My wife and I enjoy Thousand Oaks quite a bit. It's an honor and a privilege to live in Thousand Oaks as well as do business in Thousand Oaks. It's been a great place to live and work. It's been very good. The city has been very good to me and my family, and we appreciate really just the opportunity to be in Thousand Oaks. As you all know, parking has been a problem for many, many years. Some of the problems have been outlined tonight. There actually are situations where I know some of our customers or ex-customers, and I'm sure we've shared stories also, where buyers they drive around the auto mall looking for a place to park, and it's so crowded you can't see, and although we do our best to provide parking on the lots, they drive by, and I've gotten feedback that they go to other cities and they buy cars at other cities, and that's a shame. You know, that should never happen. We have good products, we have good people, we have good dealerships, and all these sales mean a lot, not only to the businesses of the auto mall, but the citizens and residents of Thousand Oaks as well. We do appreciate the city trying to help us solve this problem. It has been a partnership the last couple of years, and we really do appreciate that. We hope and believe that this solution will be good not only for the Auto Mall, but for the citizens of Thousand Oaks as well. And I'm just here to support the Auto Mall project moving forward, both as a business member of the Auto Mall as well as a citizen or resident of Thousand Oaks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Mr. Kidwai?
Nick Kidwai, representing Concerned Citizens, Thousand Oaks. Honorable Mayor Glancy, welcome back. I am, of course, supportive of the project, even though I'm holding my nose because of the shenanigans of the phantom Thousand Oaks Redevelopment Agency. But this is at least the money going back to the source, and there is no such thing as redevelopment taxes. It's basically the business taxes in the project area, which is Thousand Oaks Boulevard and the Auto Mall. Most car dealers, salespeople, mechanics are fiscal conservatives and believe in limited government and fairness in taxes. We all abhor the misuse of redevelopment funds, including formation and existence of the Thousand Oaks Boulevard redevelopment project area, which means that all of Thousand Oaks Boulevard and yes, all of the Auto Mall are economically blighted. Just the mere mention of the word blight should send shivers to any person, and it is a complete fraud committed on the Thousand Oaks taxpayers as well as California taxpayers that this area is blighted, and any red-blooded Californian should be opposed to such shenanigans. I am disappointed in the Star that mentioned that the $2 million is coming out of the city's capital fund, and I was disappointed in the staff presentation saying, almost glossing over the fact that this is from the city's redevelopment agency. The press is also not doing its job, unfortunately, of informing the taxpayers as to how their taxes are being spent. I also take umbrage to the comment that the Auto Mall sign is outdated. I remember Ambassador and former Cadillac dealer Neeson saying before the hearing in '93, where I was involved also in the fight, that the old Auto Mall sign looked like it fell off a covered wagon. This sign that was agreed upon as a compromise by the community is a great compromise, and it's certainly not outdated. One of the things that the Auto Mall dealers forget is that they have the greatest freeway frontage, and let there not be any agency, Caltrans or others, put up a sound wall so that all the car dealers are hidden away. Too much advertising, or saturated advertising, is really not that good either for the consumer or for the business people. And it is while people are not coming to the hearing, there's still a lot of people that take this issue seriously. The Oaks Mall giant sign at the corner of Hillcrest and some of the other signs are out of scale, and people have complained to me, and they will remember that in the election also, because, and my time is up, but I do support the project because it's going back to the source and it's better use of redevelopment funds than the other sources that you have done.
Thank you, Mr. Kidwai. There's one statement card, written statement card in favor of the proposal. So with that, we'll have council discussion and or motion. Dr. Gillette?
That's pretty much it. I'm prepared to make a motion, get it under discussion, and get going with it.
That'd be fine.
Fine. The Auto Mall, as stated earlier in the testimony, generates about 25% of our sales tax dollars in this community. That's not disputed. That's what it is. It's 40 years old. It's tired. The dealerships have done an exceptional job with some of the new construction, new buildings, and I believe strongly that it's our turn to show the leadership that's been proposed and get on with this issue and get that Auto Mall beefed up, improved, and spruced up. Some of the things that we read in Mr. Wartek's monthly updates, even in the struggling economy, the positive moves forward with new dealership coming into the old Saturn location, discussions with a tenant for the Chevrolet dealership. There is definitely movement out there, and I believe that it's our responsibility to do whatever we can to assist this phenomenal resource that this community has. So with that thought in mind, I move staff recommendations. 1, approve public street parking plan. 2, adopt the resolution initiating municipal code amendment. 3, adopt the resolution initiating the community facilities district. 4, approve amended and reinstated deposit reimbursement agreement. 5, authorize staff to form the ad hoc Citizens Mall Committee. And being very sensitive, I know that the points raised by Mrs. Spildale Lapena that the composition of that committee be as wide a net as possible to ensure that all of the stakeholders have a voice in the final product that comes forward.
Thank you. Comments on the motion? Ms. Rowan? None? Ms. Spildale Lapena.
Thank you. When this issue first was presented before us, I believe almost 2 years ago, I was very ambivalent and quite skeptical, I should say, regarding spending so much of what is in essence taxpayer dollars to help someone who I thought could afford it without government assistance. Given the current climate, however, of the economy, it makes complete sense to me to actually go forward with this plan. What gives me peace of mind is that an ad hoc committee of citizens will be formed, the process will be transparent, and I do appreciate that. And again, if it weren't for the economy nowadays, and especially the auto industry struggling as it does, I might still be skeptical. But as a result, due to your presentation and the fact that a beautification is extremely necessary, as well as more practicality and efficiency of the parking is needed, and therefore I will support the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Fox.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to comment on the sign because I was, as the comments were made, I was thinking back to I believe I was on the council at the time, but the dates would more lend themselves to my time in the Planning Commission. But in one respect, Mr. Kidaway is right. The sign ended up being a compromise, I think, between city staff and the council at the time. But it was a hotly contested, almost to an extreme level with respect to what turned out to be a very nice, very professional, very, very modest sign. And I'm glad one of the speakers brought that up. That was 1993. It's 2009. This city, this community, this auto mall is in a completely different place. That'll be the value of the Citizens Committee, and that was really absent when we had the sign discussions before. That whole debate was led by, in my view, very, very adversarial forces on the city council and some of the community versus trying to do the right thing for the auto mall and for the community. I think the city is in a much different place now, and I think the auto mall folks will be well served by Citizens Committee because I think you're going to get a much balanced perspective on what likely will be one of the big ticket items, and that's your sign. And appropriate signage, professional signage, but one that from a marketing standpoint and identification standpoint certainly meets your needs. So I'm very excited about that opportunity, having been around when the original sign was done, and lots of discussion about time and temperature, date and temperature. Like I said, it was actually kind of humorous thinking back. But I'm excited about this. Mr. Gillette, I think, points out it's been a long time coming. We've done some things at the Oaks Mall. We've certainly done some things on Thousand Oaks Boulevard through redevelopment. And this is just another piece of the puzzle of really creating an experience along the boulevard. And so I think we're going in the right direction.
Thank you. The auto mall has been held a special place in my heart since I came on council. It was obvious to me that it really needed something. I don't know what it was, but it definitely needed some help. And it seemed as though getting everyone, all the parties to work together was not unlike herding cats. Well, it's nice that, you know, the group got together and came up with a plan along with the city, and it speaks well for the group. It speaks well for the city. Thousand Oaks takes pride, I think, in being known as a community where our businesses are successful. And this is just a first step in getting this thing going, so I'll gladly support the motion. Maker of the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fox was talking, and talking about going back to that sign and what have you. I would start with, as I have on occasion, in the beginning, before there was an auto mall, there was Triumphal Junction, and a street that narrowed down to 2 lanes with no curbs. So we've truly come a long way. With that thought in mind, I'll restate the motion for acceptance of all points.
Thank you. Please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Wonderful. Okay. We'll have a minor change of command over there and then get started. Okay, hearing 9B, staff report, department report, my apologies. Ventura Countywide Stormwater Quality Management Program. Mr. Watkins.
Thank you, Mayor Glancy, members of the City Council. We've got several items for you in this particular report. We're going to start with the third amendment to the implementation agreement. That will carry us through this fiscal year, and then Mr. Mohammed Fatimi is with me on the dais. He's going to go through the requirements of our new permit briefly, and then I'll finish up just with a quick discussion of the budget and how this new permit impacts both the 09-10 and 10-11 budgets. The implementation agreement with the county, we entered into that agreement back in 1992 in anticipation of our first stormwater agreement. And that agreement spells out both the responsibilities for implementation and the funding for the stormwater program, with the cities as co-permittees and the Watershed Protection District as the principal. Principal permittee is responsible for district-wide implementation, writing the annual report, does all those things for the benefit of the cities. Because of that, the cities entered into an interim agreement 2 years ago to start funding the principal permittee activities. With the issuance of this new permit in May, the requirements of the principal permittee have risen along with all of the other requirements for the permit. And the public works directors and the city managers are engaged in putting together a new implementation agreement. Regardless, though, since the permit has been issued, money needs to be spent. There's things that need to be done under the new permit now. And so a new one-year interim agreement was proposed by the county and all the different cities. All the cities have agreed to that, and that is what we're requesting for City Council to approve tonight. That will take us through June of 2010. The impacts of that is that of the roughly $300,000 that we get in revenues, about $270,000 of that will go for principal permittee costs. And so the funding formula is the same as it's been in the past, and that's what's under review now. I'll let Mr. Fatimi now go through the major items, the major changes in the permit, and then we'll wrap up with funding.
Good evening. Good evening. One of the new major changes have been the public outreach program. The permit requires a much broader outreach program. We're going to need to go to the more schools and to outreach to more students. We're going to have more printout ads coming out, and we're going to see more movie slides in the theaters. The permit obligated trash excluders. Those are screens in front of the catch basins to stop trash getting into the catch basins. On high priority catch basins, those are the areas that we would be objective to the more trash. We identified about 500 locations, over 500 locations of these high-priority catch basins. This will require an increase in maintenance of those catch basins. We used to inspect catch basins once a year before, and now the permit requires us go to at least 4 inspections per year on the high-priority catch basins. Previously on the permit, the city capital improvement projects required to have only construction BMPs, but now with the new permit, we are obligated to go and forced into add permanent BMPs to the projects that they are about an acre in an area. That includes probably bigger storm drain systems, as well as bridges or parks or anything else that gets over an acre. Permit obligates us to create permanent BMP database also, which is based a regionally consistent tracking system. We need to track all the routine maintenances with all the permanent BMPs within the city of Thousand Oaks, regardless of ownership, if it's private or public. And one of the major big changes in this permit that should be taking a lot of attention is the low-impact development, LID, for the new developments and redevelopment projects. That requires a zero discharge from this sites, and in a lot of sites within the downtown or infill areas, this is almost impossible to achieve. But the permit gives us a way out as providing mitigation bank areas that would require the city to put a major capital investment into these bank areas, hoping that we would get money back from the developments coming in and they would be using those areas. California Environmental Quality Act CEQA processing within the city should be reviewed and revised to include stormwater quality criteria. We used to inspect, outreach, and train auto-related businesses and restaurants before with the existing permit, but the new permit requires us to additionally inspect laundry-related businesses, nurseries, and flower-related businesses, and state industrial permitted sites. Those are the sites that have industrial permits issued by the state of California. City's stormwater ordinance and municipal code needs to be modified as well to meet the requirements to the new permit. And we need to update the existing technical guide manual to help developers and engineers to comply with these LID and hydro modification requirements and on-site retention and no discharge requirements. Another item that is new to this permit, this is the first time we see it in the permit, is the TMDL requirement, total maximum daily loading, which requires high implementation cost for sampling, monitoring, lab testing, tracking, analysis, and reporting. This is very costly but very beneficial because it's done scientifically and will give us something to follow. Thank you.
So all of the items that Mr. Fatimi just went through are requirements of the new permit. City staff is well aware of the current financial situation in the city. This is an unfunded mandate. Current program costs have been running around $500,000 a year, and the expanded program will cost about another $500,000 a year. This slide, which is also in the staff report, shows that we've been using just under 3 employees to implement this program, and will require an additional 3 employees for a total of about 6 full-time equivalents to implement this program. What this staff report does is show where we're going to be transferring those employees from. There are no new positions. We're not recruiting or bringing folks in. What we've done is reassign the responsibilities for the stormwater quality program into the land development engineering section within Public Works. And so we have development engineers that previously were working primarily on new development projects are now seeing a transfer of their responsibilities, and they're going to be doing stormwater quality. And so a number of the recommendations for council is reallocating those positions out of one cost center into another. So that'll include additional inspectors, additional engineers, and taking folks that were previously working on development projects, putting them into the stormwater program. The other direct costs of the program are the operating costs. Operating costs, we're running about $150,000 a year. We anticipate about an additional $100,000 a year. This covers all of the non-salary type of items. And so this would be equipment rentals, for example, for cleaning out catch basins, all the mutt mitt bags that you see in the parks, just office supplies, training, all the types of things that go with running that program. And then finally, it's the capital program. There's a number of items within the permit that we're obligated to do. Probably the most expensive is the catch basin inserts. So we've got at least 500 high-priority catch basins right off the bat. The estimates on how much it's going to cost to do those varies, somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000. And so we've got $1 million programmed for year one to be implementing those screens. We're also working very aggressively to get grant funding, and so we're not asking for the funding for that tonight because we're hopeful that we're going to be able to find grant funding for that. But the obligation does exist in the permit. If we're unsuccessful, we'll have to be back to council to find a funding source for that. So with all of that, the staff recommends adoption of recommendations 1 through 6, and we're happy to go into a greater level of detail or answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Questions of staff? Okay. Ms. Watkins, I understand that the local city manager group and public works directors are contemplating possible other service delivery options. Would you please comment on that?
Sure. The requirements on the principal permittee, which is the Ventura County Watershed Protection District, have also grown over the years. Their budget was about $1.5 million last year. It's about $2.7 million this year. There's a number of activities that they perform, including monitoring, gathering all the data, putting together the annual report, public outreach. Some of those they're doing with consultants, some of those are doing in-house. And so as the cities have started to participate in the cost, we've also become then much more aware of how they're spending their money, and so the oversight is increasing. And so what the public works directors and the city managers have requested is that alternative service delivery methods be looked into. So, for example, on the monitoring side, it could be possible that another agency or that a consultant do the monitoring rather than the district. And the same thing could happen for writing the annual report, gathering data. And so what we'll be looking for is both an audit of everything that the county is doing to make sure that they're doing it in the most effective way, so we know that the money is being spent in the best way possible.
Thank you very much. Sounds good. Comments? Motion? Mr. Fox.
I'm going to move items 1 through 6. I think that covers it.
Okay. Any comments to the motion? None? Please vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks for the riveting report.
But it was quick. It was quick. Okay. We have a redevelopment agency report, item 10A. Mr. Mitnick, you have an intro for this?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this riveting item has been actually many years in the making. No. Let me give you a little housekeeping here. I'm going to do the introductory comments and give you a little bit of background, and it's largely in response to some comments and feedback and questions that have come at me from various council members and a few others. And then we're going to turn it over to our consultants, and they're going to walk you through their extensive analysis that they've done. They won't give an extensive report, but they'll walk you through the summary and the highlights. And then we'll turn it to Bill Hatcher with the Redevelopment Agency. He'll summarize the recommendations, and then we'll open it up to questions, and then public comments, and then council deliberation. And this is on item 10A, the Downtown Thousand Oaks Economic Feasibility and Design Analysis. The purpose of this analysis is fourfold. One, it's to provide an economic performance overview of the downtown district for the council. The second is to look at ways to provide a catalyst for additional private development in the downtown area. Third is to look at the viability of implementing Phase 2 of the Lakes Development and Disposition Agreement, and that would include the movie theaters, Discovery Center, and the parking structure. The fourth component here is to look at options to implement the City Council's goal to establish a viable, self-sustaining, and pedestrian-oriented downtown district for Conejo Valley residents. I want to stress that this report is about concepts and developing a potential plan with respect as to how to go forward. So by way of background, how did we get here? Well, tonight's item didn't happen in a vacuum, and it's not about one particular developer or one particular project. It's about the downtown area overall. And it really is, there's a long history here with the city going back to when we incorporated in 1964 to practice deliberate and careful land use, planning, and development. The general plan, when it was adopted in 1990, it stressed the need to have, quote, civic auditorium and to serve as a central gathering place for Conejo Valley residents. So from the very beginning, of the time when the city incorporated, it was one of the first in California to adopt the general plan in 1970. The Founding Fathers wanted to have a central gathering place. Later, in the late 1970s, the Redevelopment Agency was established, and in 1982, the Thousand Oaks Boulevard Redevelopment Project Area was established. And if you read through that, in the council reports at that time, there was a very clear goal of City Council to do commercial revitalization, infrastructure improvements, and affordable housing, among other things, in the downtown area and along Thousand Oaks Boulevard. In 1987, the City Council purchased, or began the process to purchase, the 21-acre jungle land property on which we're sitting today. And again, if you look, and in 1989, in September 1989, the council adopted the Jungle Land Specific Plan. And if you look at that document, it talks about having a civic auditorium and other amenities such as a hotel, office complex, municipal offices, i.e. City Hall, or the Civic Arts Plaza as it became, and it made reference to a central gathering place. In April 1990, the City Council then approved construction of the Civic Arts Plaza. In the fall of 1994, the Civic Arts Plaza opened. It was about 15 years ago. The Shear Forum opened in September, and the Cavalry Theater had its grand opening with Bernadette Peters and the Conejo Symphony Orchestra on October 21st and 22nd. This weekend, on Saturday, November 21st, we're still trying to sell tickets, so contact the box office. We will celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Cavalry Theater. And the same performer, Bernadette Peters, who did it then, will do it again this weekend. The New West Symphony will be the orchestra. Well, during the 1990s, Council will remember that various East Side development proposals were put forward. That's for the property on which the lakes currently sit. And these proposals looked at things like hotels, convention centers, office complexes, a Discovery Center, IMAX theaters, retail, movie theaters, etc. Council may remember that in 1990, Low Development submitted a proposal for a 450,000 square foot project. The zoning on the property allows for up to 460,000 square feet. And that's important, we'll come back to that. Well, ultimately, the Low Development project did not go forward. Council did form a committee of citizens. We're talking about the value and the history of citizen committees in this community. 107 members. 107 members, and they looked at what can be done with the East Side. After that, another DDA in 1995 was entered into, and this time with Kilroy Development. Kilroy scaled the project back down to 230,000 square feet, and for a variety of reasons, that didn't go forward. So late 1990, early 2000, discussions started with Caruso Affiliated to look at doing yet another proposal. And the reason that Caruso was brought into the mix is the Caruso Affiliated's tremendous success with the project at Moore Park and Thousand Oaks Boulevard and the Westlake Promenade, as well as other projects that it was starting in other communities. Again, if you look at the paperwork from that time, the goal was to create a central gathering place, and really to augment the success of the Civic Arts Plaza, because from the beginning, this facility has been very successful in terms of other municipal theaters throughout the country. By the way, today we have surpassed 4 million patrons at this complex. That's a pretty good number over a 15-year period, something to be very proud of. Okay, so council officially authorized negotiations with Caruso in February 2000, and at that time, the goal was to do 200,000 square feet of development. So that number keeps getting reduced. And if you look at the documents from that time, called for looking at doing an office building, a 1-acre lake with an ice skating rink. By the way, the ice skating rink opened today. I'll come back to that. Stadium-seated theaters, we didn't have any in Thousand Oaks at that time. That was a goal. Some new restaurants, retail stores, plazas, walkways, extensive landscaping, entertainment and children's programming, Discovery Center, IMAX theater, and a parking structure. So those are all the ingredients that were being looked at that time. And then in July of 2000, ultimately, council did approve a project called the Discovery Park project at that time. Now, this project was scaled back even further. It involved 2 phases, and phase 1 was for 48,000 square feet. That's 10% of what was theoretically possible based on the existing zoning at that time. So it was scaled way back, and that project is what you see today with 4 restaurants and a few retail stores. Phase 2, which has not gone forward, would allow for a 50,000 square foot movie theater complex and a parking structure. It also would allow, on the parcel in between where the Lakes is today and the Civic Arts Plaza, 110,000 square foot Discovery Center and IMAX theater. That project did not go forward. Again, if you look at the documents, there was reference to creating a, quote, heart and soul for the downtown. It needs to be stressed the motivation at that time was not money in terms of the city or the redevelopment agency. We did not view it as a project to generate sales tax or property tax or tax increment or other revenues for the city, because it required participation by the redevelopment agency in the $3.1 to $3.5 million range. And the reason the agency had to do that, I'll make that clear up front, remind the council, is because the project was scaled so far back and there were so many public amenities that were thrown on the developer that the agency had to absorb some of the off-site costs for that. Okay, so after that was approved, the Gardens of the World over here opened in December 2001, a wonderful addition to the downtown area. The Lakes itself opened in August 2005, and again, it was 1/10 of what the zoning would allow and what was originally contemplated for the site. And then in 2006, the City Council adopted its Thousand Oaks Boulevard Vision Statement, and what you called for in that statement, quote, creating a viable, self-sustaining, pedestrian safe and friendly downtown core. The Mastro's restaurant opened in 2007. Mastro's made it clear they would not have come to the community if it were not for the Lakes project. And the Lakes project wouldn't be here if it were not for the Civic Arts Plaza. So the multiplier effect started to work. Performances at the Civic Arts Plaza continued to do well. The property next door on the other side of Old Canal Road, Select Plaza, it did a facelift, used some CDBG money, and there were minor improvements in other properties in the adjacent area. There were also a number of properties that were purchased at extremely high values in anticipation of the furthering of the multiplier effect, but development of those parcels was very, very minimal. There's been a number of interesting proposals that have come forward over the last few years for the surrounding properties. The Discovery Center project, of which the agency pledged $5 million, and there were some other pledges and contributions from other companies and individuals. The council was concerned about how much would it really cost to build the Discovery Center and how much would it cost to operate it. So a formal Discovery Center feasibility study was presented to council in February 2008, and we learned that that project was very expensive to do. So that's been on hold. Then we had the recession in 2008, a year ago, and it's continued to this day. And in response to the recession and other challenges, Caruso Affiliated did submit some proposed changes to the Lakes, and one of those opened today, Nate and Al's. So what was once Sushi Co. became Nate and Al's, the very first one outside of Beverly Hills. That opened today. It's also looking at a potential conversion of some of the retail to a 5th restaurant. It added playground equipment a year or so ago. It received authorization to put some signage on the back of the building to create more visibility to those parking in the back of the project. And it also requested angled parking in the front. At the same time, there were a number of different proposals for the west side properties. The draft Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan was submitted to the city, and the City Council did direct the preparation of an environmental impact report for that. At the same time, another group has come forward with an art museum proposal for the downtown area. In addition, next month, staff is scheduled to come back to council with the Redevelopment Agency 5-year implementation plan update for the next 5 years. And we're sitting here, now would be the time for phase 2 of the lakes to go forward as well. So all this stuff is coming at us, as well as the recession, and we wanted to be able to put things in perspective, and that's why, as your staff, we recommended bringing in an outside consultant so they could take a look at the overall situation and provide some advice. And I'm going to turn it over to them in 1 second. There are three groups. You have the Concord group. They're the lead on this thing. They're doing the economics and market analysis, and we have Richard Gaulis and Andrew Boyum here. And we also have from K2GY group, and this is the group looking at design, Ken Ryan, I hope I pronounced that right, and Dan Graziano. There's another group, the Moot group. They do the cost estimation, or did the cost estimation. They're not here tonight. So I thank you for your indulgence in the background. I think that's important. I hope that answers some of the questions that have been coming at us last few days. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard Gaulis with the Concord Group. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mitnick. If we could put the slides on, that would be super. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Richard Gaulis with the Concord Group, and I wanted to add one member of the team who's in the audience is Albert Croft, who is with KTGY Group as well, who joined us for this meeting. The first thing we're going to do is just highlight from our presentation outline, walk you through hopefully in about 20 or 25 minutes to keep your attention before we get to the staff report, how we got to where we were through our analysis and really focus in on the findings that we have about the market, what our key conclusions are and recommendations that you can begin to implement as you move forward. And as the city manager identified, our role here was to evaluate what was happening in the economy right now within what we call a trade area, and also the downtown study area, also as it applies to the lakes, and really figure out what kind of measures we can put in place or recommend that you put in place through the agency to enhance the economic performance in this study area. And that would include the focal point of the objectives of creating a viable, sustainable, and pedestrian-oriented downtown, which is consistent with the vision that you folks have put out over the years. Our recommendations focus in 3 major categories. Very importantly, short-term, those that you really control in the short run that can be implemented in 1 year or less. Intermediate term, 1 to 3 years. And longer-term measures beyond 3 years that really start to fulfill the vision that you've put in place. And again, what we're going to be putting out for you are conceptual drawings. They're not what we call must-dos, but they're really ideas that we can suggest that you implement based on our analysis for your success in the future. As we look at our study area boundary, we're looking at a fairly broad area that encompasses both city-owned and private properties. There's over 22 parcels and 17 different landowners, and certainly a very complex fabric of land uses that have been developed over time. It encompasses over 40 acres and really is part of the core of the community. When we start thinking about our market areas, meaning where can we draw our economic vitality from, who are we competing with, the focal point of our analysis has been the 3 major cities of Thousand Oaks, Agoura Hills, and Westlake Village primarily, and it's based on the residential development patterns, it's based on the transportation network, and it's based on the spending patterns of the community. As we start to think about what kind of economic vitality we can put in place in the study area. So what is happening in the market? All of us are reading what's happening in the newspaper and are concerned about our economy. We focus on what's going to drive the economics of the community. And we're focusing on job growth and the nature of those jobs. And it's important to note that we've had an uptick in our unemployment in the county up to about 12% right now towards the end of 2009 and into 2010, as opposed to under 5% at the peak of our market in 2006 or 2007. The expectations, based on the economists in the market, are for full recovery, meaning get back to our 2006, 2007 levels in about 4 years. Okay, so we've got a ramp up that we're expecting. As we start thinking about land uses, it was very important for us to evaluate a full range of land use choices for the study area, and then to walk through those and identify which ones could be the best fit for the sites. So first of all, what's happening in the housing market, which is going to start to drive our retail spending? Certainly, home prices are down, sales volumes are down, and we're expecting a recovery between 2011, 2013, and 2014. So again, several years before we start to get back. On the apartment side of the marketplace, very important related to our employment, we're really looking at a recovery coming forth over the next 3 years, kind of tracking the employment market. Talking about office space, very important dynamic for our employment. We've had negative absorption, meaning we've actually lost occupied space in our marketplace significantly since the end of 2007, and we're not expecting ourselves to get back to office-using employment levels that we peaked at for another 3 to 4 years. Very important dynamic, and one that we have to recognize as we think about land use opportunities in the study area. And finally, looking at hotels and hospitality type uses, they are the most vulnerable of all the land uses and product types in the marketplace. We expect that will also lag beyond the 2013-2014. But where are the bright spots? It's actually in retail. And retail in our market area is the best performing land use. We're still at just around 5% vacant, which is very, very strong regionally. And what's interesting is we start to dive into it. Remember that map with the different areas, the trade area, East Thousand Oaks, and our local market area. Our local market area, in and around where we're sitting, is actually underperforming the broader Thousand Oaks market overall. And as you look at this slide, the most important thing to look at is the very last line, where it says retail sales per foot. In the broader trade area, about $280 a foot, East Thousand Oaks, $285. Our local market area is less than half of the sales volume per square foot than these other areas. And that's not including the auto sales in any of these different markets. And what we start to think about there is where are the opportunities that we're missing? Why are we not performing to the same level as the other parts of our market? And so we start to do some math on that, and when you look at this graph, it's really interesting. A few things jump out. We're looking at the areas where the spending capacity or the opportunity is greater than the amount of footage we have in the market, and to identify where the best fit might be. And the conclusion on the next slide is that we have opportunities in 4 key areas. Okay? Full-service sit-down restaurants, specialty food, restaurants and grocers, family entertainment, pubs and clubs, as we call them, and neighborhood serving stores that are very important for the traffic volume coming through Thousand Oaks Boulevard. And as we look at this, we've identified about 250, 260,000 feet in greater trade area and about 67,000 feet in East Thousand Oaks that is not being met in these categories. They're high spending uses, and there's opportunities to capture those in our trade area. Okay? So now we move on to our site. And we say, what are the opportunities that we can tap into, and what are the constraints that we have to deal with in our local environment? From an opportunity perspective, clearly we have the Civic Arts Plaza and the lakes as key anchors for this neighborhood. We have unmet retail demand that we just described, and we actually have underdeveloped and underutilized land throughout the district that we can start to look at and think about from an enhancement perspective. But we have some constraints. We mentioned the disparate land ownership that we have to deal with. We don't have a traditional street grid that speaks to a downtown. We have a historical collector road. We're primarily built out, meaning this is all redevelopment type activity. Redevelopment with a small r, but redevelopment and reuse. And we also don't have the critical mass right around the Civic Arts Plaza and with the lakes. As the city manager described, going from the 400,000 square foot plan initially to the under 50,000 plan today, it is not an effective catalyst for new development off-site. Thinking about access and visibility, things that we can actually improve. Signage can be improved. Potential for freeway signs. We can start to think about parking along the boulevard. We have constraints in the fact that we don't have a freeway ramp. We're in the middle of 2 major exit points. We have limited street parking, and our retail tenants, in particular on the lakes, don't have a direct access to the frontage of their store, hence coming around the back and entering. And we don't have good connectivity, very important point, between where we're sitting here and where the shoppers and patrons may be going to the lakes and back and forth. It was actually evident tonight with the speaker here this evening in the Arts Plaza and the opening of the deli, Nate and Al's in the lakes, how folks were trying to move back and forth. Most people were driving. We saw people leaving, getting in their cars and parking in this garage, as opposed to making that walk back and forth. We think there's an opportunity there. In terms of public realm, the pedestrian access we talked about, the whole idea of figuring out how to work with Thousand Oaks Boulevard to improve the pedestrian-friendly activity, and looking at a market opportunity, irrespective of politics and policy, which is not our purview, to look at housing opportunities within the district. Right now, we know that we don't have a cohesive theme. We think, and we're going to describe some implementation regulations to overcome some of these barriers. We also want to make sure that we do maintain the traffic flow along the boulevard, and we also know that we don't have a critical mass of residential. And finally, on an overall basis, before I turn it over to Ken, it's important to recognize that we do have, again, the demand for key categories of retail that can push forward our downtown district vision, and that there are opportunities through some implementation measures to make this a reality. We have to face the economic downturn and the cycle that we're in. We have to deal with the fact that we don't have a strong daytime consumer population. We're not in the middle of an employment center. We're on the edge of either. And we don't have that critical mass and that scale. So what does it mean for us as we start to think about the conclusions on the market, our assessment of the site in the downtown study area, and how that might mean in terms of implementing an overall opportunity program and implementation strategy for the downtown study area? Well, first of all, we've got to identify, and we've been charged with identifying measures in the long term that can activate the study area as a downtown district, to provide a catalyst for private future investment in the downtown, commensurate and ideally above the public investment that's already been made, to identify measures in the short term that you can control and implement quickly, and also evaluate development scenarios for phase 2 of the lakes that may be alternatives to what's already on the table, but which we can advance to move forward these objectives. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to Ken to discuss the key recommendations, and he'll also be referring to some of the maps on your slides.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you so much for allowing us to help participate in strategizing for this really important area of your community. We've done so with the attitude and the approach to follow your vision, which is really enhance the economic performance of the downtown area and to continue to create a real strong pedestrian-oriented environment. And our recommendations, there's a couple of things, particularly on the short term, I think that are important considerations. First of all, our short-term recommendations from a design perspective have been made with a couple of things in mind. One, need to be implemented fairly easily with a minimal cost, but also with a thoughtful recommendation that they would have a seamlessly consistent manner that would fold within any intermediate or long-term suggestions that you're going to evaluate and think about moving forward with. So our short-term recommendations fit into mid-term, long-term goals, and it's our recommendation to you tonight that no matter what you do, the short-term recommendations should be considered to move forward. In terms of the Civic Arts Plaza and the lakes, for major physical changes to take place over the next 2 or 3 years, we think there's some challenges associated with that based on some of the information that Richard just shared with you. But in the short term, we think it's important to utilize the resources that are available with the city and with Caruso affiliated to make the project area a more desirable destination. The short-term recommendations themselves focus primarily on the new design and circulation elements for pedestrians that are in your packet that I know you've reviewed. They're intended to mitigate some of the existing site constraints and establish a stronger sense of place that would begin to differentiate the lakes and the Civic Arts Plaza from other commercial areas within the overall trade area that Richard described. And they focus on 2 key areas: physical improvements that would increase visibility and site access, and a modification of the tenant mix. You've got a new deli that opened up tonight that's doing very well. That's a good example of those types of recommendations. Very quickly through the plan itself, we have a series of recommendations from the design perspective. First of all, our district gateway monumentation at Conejo and Thousand Oaks. Up in this area. Second recommendation is to provide for better freeway signage. Identify and figure out a way, because you don't have an off-ramp there, to get a stronger identity overall and improved visibility. Third is to look at, and I know that you've got preliminary design underway in your Public Works Department, the diagonal parking along 1,000 Oaks and move forward with additional parking to activate the current passive park environment, lure additional drive-by customers into the lakes, and improve overall access to the adjacent retail areas. Fourth, we're suggesting that between this beautiful facility that we're in here today, the Civic Arts Plaza, and between the lakes itself, to think about a strong gathering place, an amphitheater, we're suggesting, take advantage of the steep grade that's in that area, and create a connection. You know, these initial design recommendations we're making are about visibility and about better connections, and we think that given the programming that you have here in the Civic Arts Plaza and the lakes themselves, that we can suggest some physical improvements that would not only make a connection, but also another great gathering place for events, etc. Perhaps even Discovery Park elements outside next to the amphitheater itself. Number 5 is up on the top of your graphic there. We're suggesting that there be an upgrade in terms of the enhanced pedestrian linkages. There's dirt and gravel paths. We're suggesting that those be concrete. Again, make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly in terms of the walking experience. 6 is back next to the Civic Arts Plaza. This is a recommendation for a new elevator and stair. So again, that we're taking advantage of the relationship of the lakes to the Civic Arts Plaza and proposing that on the eastern side of the facility itself. And then last, number 7, we're suggesting also that there be a trellis and pedestrian connection, again, emphasizing the connection between the new gathering area outside of the Civic Arts Plaza and the lakes, as well as an identifier from the parking lot that illustrates physically and visually a stronger tie from a pedestrian perspective. Last, the tenant mix modifications is something that we would suggest in the short term that you continue to pursue as well. And I think, Richard, you have some costs.
Yeah, we have some cost estimates. I think the thing that we want to make sure that we emphasize is these are baseline short-term measures that then apply to each of the subsequent measures going forward. So it becomes a stepping stone. As we look at the cost estimates for these different items as Ken prioritized them add up to about $1.5 million, about $1 million of hard costs and about $500,000 of soft costs and other design fees and the like. What we want to do is then move quickly now to intermediate measures, and I'm going to highlight a few of them and then turn it back to Ken. But the critical issue here is to continue the comprehensive streetscape improvement, working with the sidewalks, the crosswalks, the on-street parking, improving the pedestrian-oriented experience across the district, and in particular focusing on the CAP and the lakes, and really creating that particular experience.
Our intermediate design recommendations are really aimed at tying the Civic Arts Plaza and the lakes in a stronger sense of place through streetscape and through a variety of different suggestions of Phase 2 scenarios that we believe were worth testing. And did we lose?
Right there. There you go.
We're on?
Right there. Yeah.
I don't see it on this screen. Okay. Are you seeing the slideshow, Council? There we go. Very good. The scenario 1 is very similar to the original development for Phase 2, in so much that it includes a approximately 35,000 square foot cinema, 1,200 seats. This is an 8-screen cinema with supporting 4-level parking structure, 680 spaces. We've looked at your parking requirements, including that in all of our recommendations. The cinema and other family entertainment establishment has the potential to be a significant driver of retail traffic at the site along the corridor. Anchors such as movie theaters generate regular attendance and increase retail sales in as much as 12% for a commercial core and 15% in the immediate vicinity. This scenario also has the advantage of being fairly consistent with the original approvals. On the downside, I know there are some cinemas, they tend to have low margin operators with expensive infrastructure requirements and often sometimes do require development incentives. We have included, I know in your detailed packets, case studies. As a past mayor myself, I remember experiencing that in the city in which we lived. But nonetheless, we believe that these recommendations are appropriate to think about. The site itself allows for that to occur fairly easily. Access off the Caneo here, this area behind the lakes itself would be where the cinemas would be located. What we're suggesting is that the front door to enter the cinema is actually on the front part of the lakes itself, with a parking structure behind, good pedestrian access on both sides of the cinema itself coming to the front door to enter into the site.
Right. And of course, our cost estimates. One of the things that's important here, and I think the highlight, is to identify that there is a negative land value associated with the cost of constructing the structured parking. And that's to the tune of about $3.5 to $4 million on the negative from a market perspective. And so from our experience in the case studies, some form of incentive is likely required to induce private development to make a theater operator viable at this particular site. But it is noted that the cinema can be a significant driver of retail traffic, and it's something that ought to be considered. Moving to the second scenario.
And all of these are also consistent with the landscape recommendations, additional sidewalks, et cetera, that we identified initially. The second scenario we chose as a residential option. It's large enough to accommodate that in terms of sizable units that make sense in terms of the built environment. There already are some existing amenities on the property, including, the park and open space. The addition of the residential component at the lakes would enhance the economic viability by bringing a permanent local customer base to the area. And very quickly, looking at the suggested concept, and again, these are concepts, access would come in off of Caneo here, parking structure located in the general vicinity behind the lakes. And there are two studies that we did. One would be a wrapped residential, that is to say that would utilize the parking structure adjacent to it. And another scenario would be to have a podium style or parking underneath the residential. You see this little diagram here shows that there would be, the swimming pool and the ability to have pedestrian connections again to the Civic Plaza area and to the lakes. Both of these scenarios, the wrapped residential as well as the podium residential, provides for additional parking, not just for the project itself. In the case of the podium, there'd be 183 extra spaces because you're parking underground that residential. And in the case of the wrapped program, there would be 33 extra spaces in the parking structure. Again, summarizing the benefits of that, I'm not going to say, I know you've gone through this, but we broke that down to a normal type of unit mix, et cetera. Our benefits of this scenario would be that the site is large enough for the number of units that we've talked about, 150, and again, the existing park and open space and full-time resident population.
Good. And we're almost there, so bear with us for a couple more minutes. One of the things that's important about the cost estimates here is, again, the parking solution. And we start looking at the podium solution, there's about a $4 million gap between the market-driven value of the building and what it costs to build it. And in the wrap scenario, it's a lower intensity parking use for the housing, so that gap is only about $500,000. But in either case, the gap needs to be filled in order for the market to support that particular kind of housing on site. Again, irrespective of policy.
Okay. Scenario 3 on the intermediate side was a combination of the cinema and the residential, and you have that in front of you. I'm going to go right to the graphic and essentially illustrate here how the site would work in terms of parking structure, the cinema that we talked about before, and adjacent residential. And this scenario requires a more expensive podium-style residential. If council decided to move in this direction based on the parking requirements, you would need to park underground and move forward with the podium, which is a more expensive type of program.
And from a cost perspective, again, because we need to build more parking both for the cinema and for the housing, the gap in aggregate is over $10 million related to, again, specifically the cost of parking, which ultimately makes this kind of scenario a bit prohibitive from a market perspective.
Okay. Finally, we also looked at an additional scenario. This is the complete redevelopment. We felt we needed to do this in terms of evaluation. You could see that the original DDA approved for the project would have allowed for more development with larger square footage. What would that look like? We wanted to test it. Our recommendation as your consultant, the team here, was that it's not feasible at this point given the investment that's occurred, but we did want to include that within the overall study. This indicates off of Thousand Oaks, for example, you could have a more traditional residential layout with either surface parking or a larger parking structure in the back and push that forward. We did test this. We thought tonight we probably wouldn't dwell on it, but it is in your packet for your review as part of the evaluation. Lastly, as part of our recommendations before you tonight, we also believe that there are some long-term considerations that council should think about. The overarching vision of our suggestion for long-term recommendations is to look at this district a little bit broader as a 41-acre area of contiguous parcels with multiple owners and variegated development patterns. Think about, are there some tools that over time you could move forward with to help create a more unified and attractive downtown district? The long-term recommendations elaborate on the use of specific plans and design standards as the most important tool to implement that over time. We know you've done some good work in that regards. We think perhaps there's an opportunity to evaluate that a little more deeply. And equally integral into this long-term recommendation are also elements that promote public activity, that creates a place where people want to be. The boundary that you see here it indicates, in addition to some of our initial recommendations, an expansion of gateway signage, for example, on the western side as well as the eastern side, develop a overall comprehensive distinctive design theme, and adopt specific architectural design for the district that's broader than some of the great successes that you've already have within the district itself, but along into this entire stretch of Thousand Oaks. We're also suggesting that there perhaps be a long-term vision about the appropriate uses, retail and restaurant uses, the uses that Richard highlighted in our market evaluation that make sense within the district. Those are highlighted. I know you have this in your packet within the district area itself. We're suggesting that the mixed-use designation allow for those types of uses, as well as the civic core, and tie all of that together with a strong streetscape and landscape architectural recommendations. This is a list of those uses, a list of our implementation strategies, which includes amendments to the C2CC zone, developing a separate set of design guidelines, new specific plan, increased funding, et cetera, are a number of mechanisms. We'll be happy tonight to answer any questions you have regarding that. In the essence of time, I think we'll probably move forward.
Move to the conclusion page.
Move to our conclusions.
And so, yeah, it's a bit of a blur, but when we start thinking about the conclusions, we wanted to organize them again in terms of the short term, the intermediate, and the long term. And again, focusing on the short term to activate the downtown study area using the signage, the parking, and the connectivity to improve the performance of the market in the short run. And as Ken identified, we listed 7 key areas in order of importance that we can focus on, from the monumentation to the signage to ultimately building some better connectivity between the CAP and the lakes. As we move into the intermediate term, 1 to 3 years, again, the advancement of the streetscape program to really push forward from what we did in the short term. And our preferred scenario would be the scenario with the cinema and the parking structure, which is compatible with your vision of the viable, sustainable, pedestrian-oriented downtown, and also consistent with the existing zoning. And most importantly, the movie theaters are identified through the work that we've done to be catalysts for other kinds of economic activity within the greater area that they're located. Critically, it's important that when we think about the parking structure, one of the main conclusions that we have for you tonight is that we can use the parking facility as a way to integrate not just the Civic Arts Plaza and the lakes, but also to use it as a pool of parking for the broader district, for the broader downtown study area. And we've tried to accommodate that in our calculations. And importantly, for the immediate term, there are public financing mechanisms available and probably required to support the underwriting or the full cost of structured parking in any of these scenarios. And from our experience working in this arena, these are very important enticements and, in fact, inducements for theater development and retail expansion because of the cost structure of such a development. Incentives such as loan subsidies, tax increment financing, or business improvement district assessments can all be part of the toolkit that you use to implement this program. And then finally, last slide, as we start thinking about the long term, our whole objective is to be thinking 10 years out, to look at how we can complete that transformation of your downtown study area into the district that matches your vision, to look at how we can take the planning and guideline activities that are in place and really make those have some teeth to them and make them work throughout the district. And as Ken mentioned, most importantly, how can we make sure that the investment that we have in this Civic Arts Plaza leverages to existing parks and open space, to the Lake Shopping Center particularly, to the Gardens of the World, to the other properties that Mr. Mitnick identified. And most importantly, the last bullet point is how we can make sure that other private investment in retail and commercial properties are catalyzed by the public investment that you put in place throughout the district. I'm going to turn it over to the staff.
Thank you, Richard and Ken, for a very thorough and thoughtful presentation. I'm very briefly just going to walk you through staff's recommendations that is meant to summarize what we feel is appropriate action based on the consultant's work. Most importantly, we'd like you to receive and file their report into the record. And then our recommendations are again broken down by time frame. With regard to short-term measures, which are those that can be implemented in 1 year or less, what we're recommending is that you refer the on-site improvements to the City Council Ad Hoc Committee for consideration. That is items D through G in the report on page 24 and 25, or the last 4 items under physical improvements on slide 16. And what we would hope to accomplish there is to coordinate with facilities staff on a more detailed review of these conceptual recommendations for consideration of incorporation into the formal civic arts master plan if it's deemed appropriate, and then for further refinement of cost and budget funding for these items if it's deemed appropriate. Secondly, we're asking for your concurrence on the concept of angled parking in front of the lakes. And what that would do is basically formalize the concept, and the developer could submit for discretionary permits, which they could do anyway, but that would just provide some sort of formal concurrence with that action. And then lastly, with regard to short-term, we're asking that we defer the signage and refine that as part of a district concept, streetscape concept, which is actually an intermediate term recommendation. With regard to intermediate term measures that you heard about, that's measures that are considered implementable in 1 to 3 years. We're asking you to direct staff to continue working with the developer to identify a preferred development scenario for phase 2 of the lakes, and that would be the 3 scenarios presented by the consultant this evening, with the exception of the complete redevelopment of the site. We're also asking that you concur with the concept of a more detailed streetscape improvement plan and refer that back to staff for consideration and possible incorporation into the existing Phase 2 streetscape improvement plan that exists already in the capital improvement program. And then with regard to long-term measures, what we're asking is just your concurrence with regard to the concepts presented by the consultant with regard to establishing a downtown district, and then staff would then take that into consideration as we go forward with the Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific planning process and incorporate where appropriate. So that concludes the rather lengthy presentation, and we'll all be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. It was a very complete report, and I thank you for that. It's very interesting. Comments of staff. Mr. Parks.
I don't really have any specific questions. I just, I thought your report and your analysis was absolutely right on. You guys did a very good job of capturing not only where we're at today, but how we got here. And I think you guys did that in a very diplomatic and appropriate way. So I don't have any specific questions. I think the staff recommendations are good. The only one that I would ask is that having been the original negotiator for the lakes when it first started, I do have an interest both personally in terms of continuity and in participating in further discussions. I know that one of the recommendations is to refer it to the Capital Facilities Committee, and I'm not quite sure if that's dealing with the lakes or facilities here at the Civic Arts Plaza. So that would be a minor issue, but a question I would have.
Mr. Mayor, I can clarify that. The items that we're talking about referring to the Capital Facilities Committee are those items that deal with connectivity in the short term that are largely located on the Civic Arts Plaza site.
Very good. Again, very, very good report. And we'll have council discussion, I'm sure, but this, from my perspective, this is absolutely what we need to be doing. You guys have painted a great roadmap with options for the council to look at, and a great analysis in terms of market, what's needed, what's doable, what's measurable. I love that word. You know, I'm all about results, and you guys did a very good job. Very pleased. Good work.
Thank you. Ms. Bill de la Pena.
Thank you. I do have several questions. The first question is it coincidence that the Concord Group is in the same office complex as Caruso affiliated?
It's not correct.
Oh, it's not correct.
No, we're based in Newport Beach, California.
Okay. I noticed that the
one.
addresses were the same.
No.
Okay.
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
That was an easy,
All right.
that was an easy question.
Thank you for answering that. I was curious about that. The other question I have is, I noticed in your report that you stated that it is the city's desire to have a mixed-use pedestrian-friendly core. To my knowledge, I don't know, and someone can refresh my memory, I don't know whether we signed off on a specific mixed-use development, that was something we wanted to do. So I don't know whether that would be factually correct. We have looked at such designs, but I don't know whether we have officially endorsed them, because those designs are still in the works by the Thousand Oaks Boulevard Association. The other question, actually as a follow-up to that, would be a statement was made tonight that that the forefathers had this vision, and not necessarily was it meant to be a money-making venture for the city of Thousand Oaks. Was that corrected, or did I misunderstand that? Because you mentioned the words "not money-making," Mr. Mitnick.
Right. The initial vision of the Founding Fathers, as articulated in the general plan and some of those earlier documents, they talked about the importance of having a civic auditorium and a central gathering place. The comment about not necessarily being a money-making endeavor was with respect to the DDA that was approved in the year 2000, the scaled-back project. So not in reference to the Founding Fathers. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. So the question I have is, why are we trying to, we know that the Lakes is not as successful as it could be, and that's the reason why you all were hired, to see if it could be made more successful. But why are we trying to make it more successful? In other words, everybody in this economy, in this down economy, is being hit hard. And the question I have, again, is why are we trying to increase the density in order to make it more viable? I don't understand that.
Well, perhaps I can take that, and/or the city manager might want to step in, but the city's interest in the lakes is one of the primary reasons is the desire when it was developed, and actually when the Civic Arts Plaza specific plan was adopted back in 1989 and through the other iterations, was to have it, the Civic Arts Plaza and the commercial development associated with it, become a catalyst for land use change and redevelopment of the downtown area in the close vicinity. And the Lakes has been open about 4 years now. Mr. Mitnick, and the Civic Arts Plaza has been open 15 years. Mr. Mitnick noted a few, probably what would be considered relatively minor upgrades in the area. And I think it was our belief and desire to look at ways through using the lakes as a resource, because it is on property that the redevelopment agency owns and we lease it, to see if we can get a better stimulus for the whole downtown area.
Okay. Now, we have heard testimony in the past from representatives of Caruso affiliated that there is a lot of traffic or foot traffic at the lakes. It is successful in that regard, but the people are not using the stores. Did you try to do a survey of sorts from the people who were visiting to see why they're there? What do they prefer? Do they prefer the grassy area with the entertainment over the stores that are there?
Excuse me. That actually wasn't part of their scope of work to physically survey patrons. So that did not occur.
Okay. And again, I'm wondering because I've heard from plenty visitors that they love the lakes. It's beautiful, and I agree with that. Why are they not using it? The stores don't appeal to them.
Can I address it from a little different angle? What we did look at were the, again, based on the spending patterns and the retail spending that was taking place by the folks that were in the area, and putting that in alignment, we use the term best fit, with the kind of stores that they would be shopping at. And we did identify on our slides and in the report the 4 or 5 key areas where if we put in place those types of stores, our analysis would indicate the performance would improve. And that included the restaurants, the clubs and pubs, the deli, and the like that was on that slide. So while we didn't go directly to the consumers, we did do the analysis that showed that increasing the restaurant space in particular would be a way to improve the performance of retail overall in the trade area and specifically at the lakes.
Okay. Was a draft available before this final report? Or did you submit the final report immediately to staff?
The final report was submitted directly to staff.
Okay.
It was finalized within the last week or two.
Okay, thank you. I'm asking because I would have liked to have had a little bit more time reading all of this because it is a lot to digest. That's why I'm asking.
I'm sorry, if I can interject, Mr. Mayor. Sure. Members of the council, we handle this staff report as we handle every other staff report for every other agenda item. Once the staff reports are final, then they're put in the agenda packet. As a matter of practice, we don't provide copies in advance to council members or outside parties.
Thank you for clarifying that. It is a rather large report with a lot of detailed information, so it would have been nice to have had a little bit more time to read that. Obviously, you are fully aware that the DDA, from 2004, was it, or 2002, included a Phase 2, which was the cinemas and the parking garage. So that is something that was already talked about, that was already included. We already had design plans for that, I believe. Any reason why that was rehashed when that was already there?
I'll answer that. What we wanted to do was, and actually with regard to the DDA, the extent of the plans were conceptual representation of location. So there was a generalized area that depicted a cinema location and a generalized area that depicted a parking structure, and that was as far as any type of design work had gone. What we had asked the consultant to do, though, was to look at the current Phase 2 scenario, given some of the things that have occurred since that DDA was approved. I mean, obviously the economy has changed. Some of the elements with regard to the theater business within the city have changed because of the opening of MovieCo at the Oaks. And so we asked them to look at the economics of the existing Phase 2, and that's what they did. And as part of that, they provided us with a generalized cost estimate of what it would cost to construct that and whether it would be economically viable in current economic situation.
Is there someone here that can tell me what would happen if we didn't do anything to this property at all and leave it as is? That was not an option presented, and I would like to know why not.
Well, I guess the short answer is that we asked them to investigate change and not status quo, so that wasn't part of the scope of work.
Okay, perhaps Mr. Prescott or Mr. Mitnick can answer as to why we need to develop this.
I'll handle that. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I thought staff had explained that at the beginning, going through the long history. And this report is not just about the lakes or Crusoe affiliated. They're a component. There are a number of things that are happening and coming at the city at the same time. And I thought we had covered that earlier with respect to some of the requests in terms of the angled parking in the front of the Lakes project, the specific plan for the boulevard, the art museum proposal, different proposals for the west side, dealing with the adjacent properties where very high prices were paid for the properties, making them very difficult to develop going forward. We are also, I remind the council that we're a partner with the Crusoe affiliated next door because we own the land, but also we have our extreme self-interest here, not from a sales tax or property tax perspective, but we are in the theater business. We run a performing arts theater, and we need to make sure that the theater remains viable and in the black. And you do that by making sure that the overall businesses around us, that there's some there, and that there's the pedestrian activity. So it's all of these things that came together at the same time. And we have a history of working with outside consultants to help us see a bigger perspective. We did it with the Discovery Center, I know we talked about that earlier. We did a feasibility analysis for that. So all of these things are coming together at the same time. And I would also like to add that it's not a question as to whether or not one operator, Crusoe affiliated, is successful or not. That's not the issue. That project next door it's in the black and it's successful. And if it wasn't for that particular operator, we would have other challenges in front of us. But that project in and of itself can't save the downtown or create a downtown by itself. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but it's a complex issue.
Thank you. The staff report does indicate that the agreement was there would be a 12% return, and that has not been fulfilled. And so it is in the city's best interest to make sure that that return is realized. That is what the staff report says. Why does it need to be realized?
I think the significance of the 12% return is that unless that level is reached by the lakes, the city doesn't receive any ground lease payments. So while it's not a driving force in the reasons why we're doing the study, it is a sort of a factual consideration that if the return did get to the 12% level, which was specified in the DDA, then the agency would start receiving ground lease payments.
Because this is a redevelopment project, are there any monies that wouldn't be able to be paid or anything like that? Or, I mean, what would be the deal if we were to keep the status quo?
I'll interject. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as mentioned earlier, the DDA that was entered into in 2000 was done not for the economics of it. It was to help the council realize its goal of downsizing the project with extensive public amenities. So the project put forward at that time did achieve that. The goal was to get to a 12% return, and if we could do that, that would be gravy, and we knew that that would be a challenge, and that challenge was based on the multiplier effect of other development happening in and around the lakes. To a large extent, the lakes and the Civic Arts Plaza has become a victim of its own success. It has attracted a lot of interest in the acquisition of properties around us at very high prices, and it's made the development of those properties difficult. I just want to stress, because this council has long been about achieving good land use and not making land use decisions based on economics. That's very much illustrated with respect to the Lakes project next door. That deal that was done for a 48,000 square foot project was not based on economics for the redevelopment agency in terms of tax increment or sales tax revenue. But if we can get to that 12% return and we can generate some lease revenues, that would be gravy. We brought in the consultants not so much to achieve that 12% figure, but to give us an idea as to how we can achieve the bigger picture goal of the pedestrian-oriented, viable, self-sustaining downtown. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the only thing I would add as a consultant on that question is that we looked at it from that approach. In other communities that we've worked on where they have some of these challenges, you have some incredible opportunities here. There's great bones. But what we have found, particularly in the downturn economy today, is that status quo doesn't stay status quo. And so our recommendations from a design perspective weren't just about this site. They were about trying to give you some guidance and some choice, thoughtful choice over time to make sure that this vision that you have for this pedestrian-oriented district that's economically viable, speaks to Thousand Oaks. It becomes this great place. I wanted to just briefly comment, too. Our mixed-use suggestions weren't just about density. They were about creating synergy and placemaking and connections. And so hopefully you've got a range of opportunities to look at there, but it was with the understanding that you have a district of which there's some great pieces there, but it's not fully connected and fully articulated yet. And it's our recommendation as consultants, that's the fun thing that we get to do, is that we would suggest to you that a long-term, any mid-term, any short-term direction to make sure that as change does take place, you're seeing your vision implemented. Those are our probably big takeaways for you tonight. So.
Thank you for stating that. In looking at the proposal for a movie theater, I'm also thinking about the Jans Mall, which has several movie theaters, and the Jans Mall is not really comparable, but it is along a very busy street, a main corridor, a commercial corridor in Thousand Oaks, and it has been struggling as well. So aren't we going to make it even more difficult if we were to bring in more movie theaters into that area?
I'll attempt to answer that. I think the movie theater entertainment option, I should point that out too. We keep talking about a cinema, but in essence it could also be some other type of entertainment use, and I think that was stated in the report. But also in our recommendations, what we said is the consultant said they thought the movie theater option was the best option because of its generating effect on retail sales in an area. And I think as staff, we said that we're not convinced that that is the best option. There's other options that were presented that are equally as intriguing, and that's why our recommendation to you is to refer that back to us for further discussion with the developer to decide on a more preferable or a preferable option. And then at that time, we would be in a position to come with a direct representation as to a phase 2 scenario.
Now, there really isn't any guarantee, really, when you think about it, that any of this would work even if we were to follow all the recommendations, right?
I believe Mr. Mitnick wants to answer.
Again, Council, the consultants are giving, they did some analytical work. They're giving you some things to think about and some options and some initial phase 1 stuff that can be done. And then it's got suggestions as to what can be looked at over the next several years. So that's all there is to it. There's no set recommendation that if you do this, all this will happen. That's not how land use planning works. You just sort of take a look at it and see what the options are. They've given us some other things to look at.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that we've based our recommendations, no place is alike. I think that's the fun thing about this business, and every community has its own objectives and its own characteristics that are local and their own design attributes that you want to think about. But there are some fundamental design principles that do create great destinations and great pedestrian environments, and it's mainly the recommendations that we have before you are unique in terms of the market and the site and what you have going on, but they also are based on good pedestrian connections, great streetscape, good access, good parking. And so those recommendations, particularly on the short term, are fundamentally based on successful pedestrian environments you see around the world. And so those are why we've made those recommendations to you.
How did you arrive at the cost of the elevator? $185,000?
I have to ask my expert Dan Graziano on that. How did we come up with the elevator?
I'll answer that question for the MOOC group who's not here. I mean, it was a cost estimate based on the hard cost of that particular elevator structure in that particular location. And there's backup in the report for that.
Okay, you don't want to hear how much the other elevator costs that we built years ago. That was a whole other story. Okay.
How's it going here?
Pardon me? Let's see. I noticed that in your plans, one consistent and persistent part is the amphitheater. Why did you feel that that is necessary throughout all of the different proposals you presented to us tonight?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, you have what some might say is a constraint. There's a dip in topography. We thought that was a real strong opportunity. There's an open space element associated with this entire district we think is fabulous. We think that there's a linear distance as well as a vertical distance that we wanted to provide physical and visual connections that feel closer and more connected. And also we thought there was an opportunity to have more events. You know, you've got great indoor facilities here, you've got outdoor space. We felt that given the topography, there was a natural opportunity to design an amphitheater there. We do think there's some opportunities in those open spaces next to that to have some of those discovery elements. There might be an educational factor. So as part of thinking about great destinations and attracting people, we thought there was another opportunity to have another reason why people would want to come to this area, as well as physically bridge the distance between the Civic Arts Plaza and the lakes itself. And it was kind of a natural recommendation.
And let me just add to that, it is something that you can implement in the short term, and it's something that if you put it in place in the short run, could carry forth for the long run. It's not to say that you have to do it, that you must do it in the short run. It could come in phase 2. It could come in later, but it is an opportunity that we identified, as Ken said, to energize the environment between this Arts Plaza and the existing parking.
Our suggestion, too, as you've done with other elements in your city here, is that it could also be very visually intriguing, and so part of it isn't just to make a connection between the Civic Arts Plaza and the lakes, but also have something that's interesting in between those two destinations also.
I do like the idea because I think it does speak to the fact that people are attracted to the grassy areas, to the open space, and that seems to be really the highlight of that corner of Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Thank you very much for answering all my questions. I appreciate that.
Okay. Ms. Irwin.
Thank you, Dr. Glancy. Great report. I think it was really important that we did this and that we really looked at these issues deeply. And I think that you really went into a lot of the kind of shortcomings that we're dealing with here. I have a question on, again, the cinema being a big driver of retail. I guess the assumption is there that, because I look at your suggestions and you're suggesting that we move toward restaurants and that the entrance to the cinema is there at the lake. So you're really saying that it's a significant driver of retail traffic elsewhere in the surrounding areas, hoping that that develops?
It's a combination of both. What we found, and there are case studies that we did in our analysis, what we found in looking at a number of movie theater redevelopment opportunities that have been put in place is that they do have that catalytic effect of helping to rise the retail sales in a broader district, not just in the center where they're located. Now,
right.
of course,
well, what I'm saying is after you put in additional restaurants, that there's not much retail left there.
Hence the idea that we're creating the opportunity for other private retail development along the boulevard.
Okay. And, you know, I think you are, for me it's very important that this center become economically viable. And really, I mean, I hate to say it, probably the best option was the start over option, but that would be really economically unviable because of what is there already. But we're dealing with an area that has shortcomings, and so I think, you know, we need to be very careful in wading through all the different options. That's really obvious. That we're trying to fix something like I said, there were constraints put on it a number of years ago, and so I appreciate all the suggestions you gave, and I think that we have to just wade through very carefully and hopefully create that downtown area. So I really appreciate the presentation.
If I could add, Mr. Mayor, Madam Councilmember, one comment to tag on to Richard's. The parking structure also wasn't just for the cinema. There's 120, conceptually, I know we're dealing with concept here, but we did look at our, parking numbers, et cetera. There's 126 spaces of extra parking in that parking structure. And again, our thinking is that as this district evolves over time, you've got other uses that come into play beyond just the lakes. That parking structure would also facilitate extra parking for the larger district. So that was a little bit in our thought process also.
And I just want to add one more thing, that in our, when we surveyed the residents, one of the top priorities they have for developing a downtown area is additional parking, so that's definitely critical. Thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Seeing none, gentlemen, that was a tremendous report and a very nice presentation. I will not ask you a question, but I will say that it points out exactly how complex this issue is, and if we want to have a viable area, a viable downtown, and a viable city, we have to look beyond the end of our noses. So thank you very, very much for your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do want to say for the record, your city manager said we had 25 minutes, and I timed this. I think we're at 27, so I would just want to let you know we were close.
You owe us two. Thanks again. Okay, we have some speaker cards. First speaker, Ken Ryan, followed by Nick Kidwai, followed by Rick Lemo.
Mr. Mayor, I think you heard enough from me tonight, probably. I'm Ken Ryan.
Sorry.
Okay.
I confuse easily. Nick Kidwai, followed by Rick Lemo.
Want Mr. Lemo to go in front of me?
Good evening again.
Good evening, Mayor Glancy. Nick Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park. I liked that the city manager gave the history, but he conveniently left out that the city's fiscal conservative residents voted for the facility to be self-sustaining, i.e. there would be no subsidy, which has completely failed, and the vote of the people on the basis that this building was built on has just been put down through the flush. It's really sad. Thousand Oaks Boulevard mayor is not blighted. And the businesses who own these multi-million-dollar properties need all the property taxes from the boulevard going to them rather than going to the state system or to fix the 101 or to keep the state from being bankrupt. In business, smart people know, Mayor, when to cut their losses. The mistake was to buy too much, i.e. 22 acres. The theaters, the lakes are net losers on a dollar basis, and they probably always will be. Further commercial development will be just like throwing good money after bad. What the council member said about keeping the status quo, you need to go one step further, and that should be a motion to sell, and the property is owned by Caruso now, or leased by Caruso, from what I understand, that you cut your losses, and the citizens, I mean, it is true, this is not 1993. I mean, the people in this state are going to be coming down hard on the redevelopment agencies, and there will be, the free gravy and the free train ride will be over. It is sad that the consultants decry that the movie co has opened when they chose Thousand Oaks in the whole state for their theater. It's so sad to see that government wants to encroach upon the free enterprise system, and especially to see Mr. Mayor Glancy leading the charge. I would like to ask the consultants, because this thing has puzzled me and nobody has given the answer. Hopefully they will answer this question. On the one hand, you have places like Hungry Hunter that were leased for $30,000 a month. You have other restaurants that command a $20,000 a month lease. Here, Mr. Caruso is getting the land for $1 a year. He has development costs. So, and he charges full rent to the restaurants. But in a way, where does the economics come in, where there's a restaurant which is theoretically getting zero rent, or has the potential of getting very little rent. If TOTV can show that, I mean, the report that I have about the lakes, it's blacked out. I mean, you don't need to be in this business. You're not in the defense business that you need to hide things from taxpayers. It's very sad. My comments also were not put in the green packet. This is very disgusting. This is not the way to run a good business, or good government rather. You're not in business.
Thank you, Mr. Kidwai. Mr. Lemo.
Rick Lemo, Newberry Park section of Thousand Oaks. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and City staff. Congratulations to all of our city staff and consultants for the hard work you put in on the report. I thought it was also a very complete report. I particularly want to thank our city manager because you gave a very detailed history of what's taken place. I would shorten your report a little by saying that what we have learned from your report alone is that if we continue to ignore history, we doom ourselves by repeating it. Let me give you a few facts versus the myths that we sometimes hear over and over again. First of all, I'm a little disappointed, but Caruso Affiliated does not have an office anywhere near Newport Beach. I would appreciate it. It would be fun. It's not close, and how that mistake came up just doesn't make sense, nor the insinuation that there may be some relatability, not necessarily the case. Potential opportunity missed, that's what I heard over and over again in the report. There were many times that before Mr. Caruso answered a request by a former city council member. It's unbelievable. No good deed goes unpunished, but most particularly in Thousand Oaks, no good deed goes unpunished. A former council member said, "We need to get your help here because everyone else has failed getting by city council next door." And then a current city council member who had really held Mr. Caruso's feet to the fire when he built the promenade said, "Would you like to do this again?" I can't believe Mr. Fox did that with a straight face, but he convinced him this was the place to go. Fact versus myth. Let there be no mistake if you read your own public record that Kathy Head from Kaiser Marsden made it abundantly clear that this land had to have a different deal on it because the politics of the time demanded that it not be used for its highest and best use. There has never been a critical mass of retail there, and I want to congratulate Councilmember De La Pena because you proved that when government and politics interferes with business, even the best of businessmen are going uphill. There's an 8% return there. I think you'd be very, very hard to find most businesses in Thousand Oaks in this economic climate as successful. The reason there's not a lot of shopping going on next door is because there's no critical mass. But what did Mr. Caruso do? Mr. Caruso identified what is working well there, and with the help of City Council, converted it to restaurants. And I don't know if you had the time today, but as CBS News reported today, you had a 20-minute wait to get in for lunch. So I think we want to start trying something brand new in this city. As a citizen, I make this request, not as a business citizen, as somebody who lives here. Let's quit the innuendo, let's put aside the myths, deal with the facts, and you too will turn pale white. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemo. That's the end of our public comment. We'll entertain comments. Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I made my comments relative to the consultant's report. The staff report in part mirrors the consultant's report, but I think it differs in a number of areas. And let me just share for discussion purposes, I don't know that I'm prepared really to choose one over the other this evening. Ms. Irwin, I think, correctly pointed out there's a lot of complexities with this. There's also, as the report points out, a lot of opportunities. And without going back and revisiting history, we got a chance now again to get it right. We had it right to begin with, in my view. There was substantial changes made, which brought us to today, and now we have a chance to get it right. And I think all of us would agree, the climate in the community now is much different than it was in 2002. Just very briefly, I think the issue of a parking structure, which was hotly debated that would ruin Thousand Oaks Boulevard as we know it. I think now I can't foresee that debate even gets any kind of serious consideration in regard to what we're trying to do along the boulevard. The consultant correctly pointed out today, which was true in 2000, that the whole purpose of the parking structure wasn't so much for the lakes or even to assist with the Civic Arts Plaza. It was a point of synergy where people would get out of their car and walk, not just to the lakes, but to other destinations along the boulevard. It was part of a longer, broader vision. And I think that vision can still be realized somewhere down the road. And again, I think you guys did a great job of providing a roadmap that's measurable, not just in the short term, but moving forward of what our vision would be for the boulevard, and it would complement very nicely into what the boulevard owners are doing in terms of their specific plans. So I think this makes a lot of sense. My suggestion would be that we do what's worked in the past, and we continue to use a citizens committee and council committees to look at this and bring back solid recommendations to the council on which direction to go, whether it's cinema and parking structure, a combination of housing, cinema, parking structure, the housing. I think there's a number of things to look at. I don't think they lend themselves appropriately to tonight's council meeting. I think they need more discussion, more analysis, and I don't know in terms of about a citizens committee, but I think these things need to be looked at and analyzed. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you for your thoughts. Further. Ms. Irwin.
Yeah, I think that really was what I was stating, that it's very complicated and it's difficult just on this report to go through. So maybe, well, at a minimum, a council committee, but a citizen committee and getting more input would be helpful. I'm not sure if we need to do that right at this point, but there was a big mistake there, and we need to hopefully find the opportunity to correct it. So I will be, was that a motion, Mr. Fox?
I did not put a motion. I'm certainly prepared to do that, but I just wanted to float some ideas for council consideration.
Okay. Ms. Bildea-Pena. Comment?
I could certainly vote for receive and file. As it is obvious, it is very difficult to make a decision based on the recommendations tonight. It is helpful information to have. However, as we heard, the developer is already making an 8% return. So obviously it is successful. We've known that. And everybody in this weak economy is hurting. There is no doubt about that. I don't see why with these improvements, whether it would make a big difference. It very well might be, but perhaps it would also be throwing good money after bad. And the status quo looks very, very attractive to me currently. With the addition of the deli, perhaps things will change, and it is my hope, my fervent hope, that things would change. The vision of having a downtown is admirable. I would prefer to have a downtown in this area as well. But the fact is that we have another very busy area that could be considered downtown, which is the commercial corridor along Moore Park Street, and where the Oaks Mall is, and Hillcrest Drive. So the idea of having a downtown, and must have a downtown, and we must complete this vision, sometimes to me, borders on delusions of grandeur. We should just really accept the fact that Thousand Oaks is the way it is, and people will be very happy with a beautification of Thousand Oaks Boulevard. The Thousand Oaks Boulevard Association is already working on beautifying the area. They've hired their own consultants. Now we have this separate piece, which is actually part and should be part of the overall special district by the Thousand Oaks Boulevard Association. It is the timing of this is, excuse me, is in my opinion not a very good one right now. So I would vote for receive and file, but not necessarily about going forward with anything else. We've already expended too many millions of dollars, and right now we can't afford to spend more. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll once again join the crowd and say it's a complex issue. It is indeed a complex issue. When I look at the ownership of the surrounding properties, I'm flabbergasted as to how one maps out an attack strategy, acquisition strategy, or whatever. But I think that it's incumbent upon us, as responsible council people, to strive for a successful, viable business environment. If we don't, we'll get static, stale, and kind of wither. And it is a tough climate, and it's because it's a tough climate, we have to be proactive. We can't just wait for something to happen and then respond to it. We have to be on top of it and in front of it. The status quo is sometimes tempting. I think it's tantamount to putting your head in the sand. It's not looking at what's around you and responding to it. We talk about density in this community, and it's like the quality of life, the way of life as we know it is coming to an end. We're going to have to adjust to some kind of a concept of density, or we're going to have to adjust to a concept of sprawl, because HCD in Sacramento is going to require that we accommodate a certain number of residences, and you can't do it where we got the space. So we're going to have to change the way we think if we're going to stay ahead of the curve. I recently had an opportunity to be in San Antonio and enjoyed in the evening hours the Riverwalk. Now, this was accomplished by city councils many, many, many years ago that had the vision for an area that was a collection point for the citizens, a place for recreation, and strong business interests. It was remarkably successful. These people had vision, they had the guts to follow that vision and pursue it. And that's in light of the, as you would expect, those that didn't want to do this and they had other things in mind, or they had nothing in mind. But the result of these people taking action and following through on it is a rather tremendous asset to Texas, and actually is the #1 destination in Texas. We look at what staff recommendation was. Mr. Hatcher pointed out, very first recommendation is to receive and file the report. If you look at point 1A, it's to refer to the ad hoc capital facilities committee. B is concurrence on the angled parking, so that's a take action or an acceptance of a suggestion. C is to defer action. Point 2A, refer to staff for further discussion. B, refer to staff for more detailed review. 3, refer to staff for incorporation where appropriate. So what we're talking about is not taking action on hardly anything at all. It's to refer to staff for further study. And I think that's really what we're kind of talking about here, is having further study, looking at it more completely and really weighing what we have before us. So I'm at the will of the council, and Mr. Fox.
Yeah, with deference and respect to staff, I don't think Mr. Gillette's had a chance to comment, but I don't think these discussions lend themselves at the staff level. I believe that as the leaders of this community, as the elected representatives who should be providing a vision and a roadmap for where this community goes with input from the community, of which I don't know of a single item that has received more community input from the citizens of 107 and the Charettes, and my office is literally filled with input and designs and concepts that are related to this area. There is plenty of information out there, but this report, I think, brings it down and synthesizes it in a way that it gives, as I said before, it gives us a roadmap. And I think we really need a council committee to look at these issues and at least make a recommendation for a course for council to follow. That's why I suggested the council committee. It's not the staff can't do it. So, that's my sense.
Are you making a motion?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and, well, let me hear from Mr. Gillette first.
Mr. Gillette was not looking like he wanted to talk. My apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and obviously I just listening with a great deal of interest, and I deeply appreciate the analysis in the report. And I think it would be a terrible missed opportunity if we simply received and filed and put this on the shelf. I don't think that this is one of those things where you can subscribe to a philosophy of you can't do anything wrong if you don't do anything at all. Because we have taken some steps, and maybe a couple missteps, but we have the opportunity, even in this economic downturn, to get a hold of this situation and start moving it in the right direction. And I was, if Mr. Fox hadn't said it, I was going to bring it up. Repeated public interest, and I'm talking broad public interest, not small group that is highly critical of every single thing that goes on in this community, but broad community interest. This is the commercial corridor, and this is the core of the commercial corridor. It is the Civic Arts Plaza, and the opportunities that exist here will, I think, eventually take root and grow out and help work with the Business Improvement District as their plans come forward and are modified and we work on it. But I think we have to keep moving forward with it. We have to keep working on it. We're a young community, and this would be a terrible time to just let this whole thing kind of curl up and die. So the idea, because of the tremendous public interest that we see on attitude survey after attitude survey, Mr. Fox's suggestion about the impaneling of a committee, a resident committee, and hopefully a broad-based committee with council participation. That process has worked very, very well for us in the past, and I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it continue, because it's one of those things that would carry on after a number of us may no longer be here. So that's my observation, my analysis of this current situation.
Okay, before we go back to Mr. Fox, Mr. Mitnick, you have a comment?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, a suggestion how you can get there with respect to the recommended committee. You could recommend that we do move forward with the short-term recommendations as they're outlined, because they are time-sensitive. But then for recommendations 2 and 3, the intermediate and long-term, you could recommend forming a council committee to provide direction, and we can start meeting right away to do those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that in mind, Mr. Fox, you have a motion?
I would move that we refer these items to a council committee, and the council committee would then bring back recommendations to the council on the course and approach to dealing with the consultant's report in combination with the staff report.
Okay, thanks. Any comments to the motion? Ms. Irwin?
Are you taking Mr. Mitnick's suggestion to move forward on the short term? Because I know that angled parking is something that the staff has really thoroughly looked at.
I know staff has looked at it. I've had some preliminary conversations. While I think we do need to move forward relatively quickly in the short term, I don't want to piecemeal this process, and so no, I would not recommend that we take any action tonight. Obviously, that would be the first order of business of the committee to take a look at those short-term issues. But as the consultants themselves pointed out, the short term is really part of a longer continuum, and one builds upon the other, and I think you have to have a vision for the whole puzzle, so to speak, at least in some fashion, in order to make kind of a informed decision. So I think it's important to take a look at it from that perspective.
Okay, comments on the motion? Any other? Maker of the motion, and you have no follow-up, I'm assuming?
You know, I do have to comment a bit on, while there's a perspective and a respectful one of status quo, I was just sitting here thinking over the years about where we would be as a community if the status quo notion would prevail. And I just want to share a few perspectives. We have theaters at all 3 Thousand Oaks high schools. That was a 3-2 vote, and the alternative was status quo. We don't need to do those things. We have stadiums and stadium bleachers at all 3 high schools. That was a decision made using developer funds at a time when developer funds were routinely criticized as a sweetheart deal for the developer. Today, our kids are using and playing state-of-the-art facilities. We have an entire community out in the western part of our community called Dos Vientos, and a hotly contested road called Borchard Road, which many may forget, but Borchard Road was status quo. We don't need Borchard Road or in the current state that it's in. The facility that we're sitting in here today, the Civic Arts Plaza and City Hall, status quo. We don't need a City Hall. We already have one across the street from Amgen. And finally, the Western Plateau. The Western Plateau is a piece of open space that connects our ring of open space in the western end of the city. The status quo argument was it'll never be developed. We don't need to take action. And then the conversation that we're having here tonight. There are times when doing nothing because of some of the things that have been pointed out do make sense. The timing just isn't right. The economics aren't right. But the history of the city has shown that this council and previous councils, I think, have made visionary decisions that really have placed us in a position today in a number of areas that we are the community that we are because of those decisions that did require vision, they required courage, and they required commitment on the part of the community and the council. And I see this opportunity to get it right in this area of town as a really good opportunity for us that we'll be dealing with for a number of years. It's not going to be something that's accomplished in the next 1 to 3 years. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor.
May I interject just real fast and ask you if you would suggest a couple of council members to sit on this committee to be in the shooting match?
Well, I'll leave that to the mayor, it's the mayor's discretion to do that, but I would certainly like to volunteer to serve as one member of this committee, given my involvement and my history with the project.
Okay, consider it done. And I'll think about the other. Okay, thank you. With that said, please vote.
The motion carries 4-1. Councilmember Bill De La Pena dissenting.
Gentlemen, again, thank you for a great report. A little bit frightening, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Committee, commission, board reports, we have none. Council issues, recommendations, follow-ups of meetings, National League of Cities. Dr. Gillette, you want to start out?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the supplemental green pack, there is a detailed memorandum on the 2009 Congress of Cities, which took place the 10th through the 15th of November in San Antonio, Texas. I attended as the vice chair and now nominated chair of the Public Safety, Crime Prevention, both policy and steering committees, and I draw the council's attention, or direct the council's attention to page 37 in the green packet for what I consider the primary issues dealt with by this committee in San Antonio. The resolutions that are now standing on the part of this committee involving effective emergency preparedness and response and action on related issues. And keep in mind, this is all directed towards federal responses to local jurisdictions, to cities and towns across the United States, including our Thousand Oaks here in Ventura County. Support for interoperability, public safety communication systems and funding, national standards for integrated justice information systems, a reversal on the United States' current Mexican extradition policy, support for electronic control devices, support and efforts to fight illegal guns, encouraging cities to determine public safety impacts resulting from the transportation of high-level nuclear waste, supporting the right of cities to receive federal reimbursement for services provided to citizens from communities affected in an emergency, and any additional information, federal rules supporting hometown security and combating violent crime, FEMA to adopt regulations to permit municipalities to obtain disaster assistance when counties are not eligible, resolution on cradle-to-prison pipeline, and urging federal resources to support increased DNA use and nonviolent crime. These are the resolutions that came out of that meeting and have gone forward as part of the National League of Cities policy. Additional information is contained. The recommendation is to receive, that's that half of it. Dr. Glancy?
Thank you very much. I was there as a representative to the ITC, Information Technology Communications Steering Committee, and the Policy and Advocacy Committee. And what we've been dealing with for this last year was really the dispersal of broadband technology to try to get the United States on a par with many of the European and Asian countries in what their electronic capabilities are and in distribution to the underserved particularly. While there, I attended many workshops and lectures that were really pretty interesting. It was interesting, for one thing, that at the federal level, there's just as much emphasis on how communities can cope with the environment, cope with the financial environment. It's not just we in California who are trying to do this, but it's at a national level also. It's interesting, too, that Mayor Ron Leverage from Riverside was sworn in as the president of the National League of Cities. He's the first representative from California to hold that office since Tom Bradley. So it was a good meeting. All these meetings are good meetings when you get out and push the needs and desires of our community, and that it results in good things. So I recommend that we receive this report, and we don't have to vote, do we? Great. Okay, Mr. Mitnick. No vote. Yeah, Mr. Mitnick, City Manager.
Okay, by way of follow-up, we'll put on the website the two items that were mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. The next council meeting will be on December 8th, and it's a reorganization meeting. And that afternoon at 11:30, there will be the annual State of the City address by the mayor, and that will take place at the Los Robles Golf Course banquet facility. And that event is put together by the Chamber of Commerce. So if individuals are interested, please contact the Chamber of Commerce, or you can also go to the city website, and there'll be information there. The reorganization meeting will be in the council chambers at 6:30 p.m., not 6 p.m., but 6:30 p.m. on December 8th. Then the next council meeting after that will be on December 15th, and there are 3 public hearings anticipated for that night. One is the floodplain management ordinance. We mentioned that's continued from tonight, and that's subject to FEMA action. If FEMA does come back, we'll have that hearing. If they don't, it'll be delayed into the next year. The Redevelopment Agency 5-year implementation plan for the period of 2010 through 2014. There will be a public hearing for that. And then finally, an appeal of, I think this is a mobile home site for T-Mobile at Westlake and Skeleton Canyon Circle. That's it by way of City Manager follow-up and announcements. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Albano, you're going to announce a closed session?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, staff, and viewing public. The council will be going into closed session on a public employee claimed worker compensation case. This is existing litigation. Claimant James it's PISCIOTTA, and it's Government Code Section 54956.95A, subsection A. And if there's anything to be reported out, it'll be reflected in the minutes of the council's meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Albano. Mr. Fox has the adjournment tonight in memory of Brian Bannister. Mr. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight we're going to be adjourning our meeting in honor of Brian Bannister. Brian was 22 years old at the time of his death, and he was working as a Ventura County firefighter and was a lifelong resident of Thousand Oaks. Brian worked for the fire district here in Ventura County as a fire control worker for 3 fire seasons. He was assigned to fighting fires, brush fires with hand tools, which I can tell you from personal experience is, without question, the toughest work anyone could possibly do. Very labor-intensive, very difficult, very dangerous work. His love for his career and his passion for life were evident in everything that he did. Brian's hobbies included snowboarding, surfing, hiking, virtually anything done outdoors. Brian would be missed by his family and his many friends. He graduated from Westlake High School in 2004. On behalf of the City Council, I'd like to express our sincerest condolences to Brian's family and his other family, his fellow colleagues and firefighters from the Ventura County Fire District. We'd also like to express our regrets and express our condolences to the Cortez Gomez family. Mr. Gomez was a Good Samaritan who was involved in the accident and died along with Brian on that day. So let's all say a prayer for both the Cortez family and the Gomez family and the Bannister family. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And thank you, Mr. Fox. With that, we'll adjourn this meeting to December 8, 2009, 6:30 p.m.